Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Scion Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Pheonix Spirit Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku's friendship with Katsuki had always been a little strange. They'd known each other since diapers and lived next door to each other just as long. The two were as thick as thieves until Katsuki's quirk manifested. Even then, some might say they got even closer. Izuku's quirk, labeled as heat immunity, meant that the heat from the explosions didn't so much as faze him, though the force from the explosions was a different case. It wasn't like Kaken could actually burn him though, so Izuku was the only one that Katsuki let close. Initially, Izuku thought that Katsuki was scared of hurting people with his quirk. Then Katsuki started bullying their classmates that he deemed to have weak quirks, and Izuku didn't think that anymore. More often than not, Izuku found himself putting his own body between Katsuki and his victims. It was almost pettiness that kept him dogging Katsuki's heels. The knowledge that nothing the other boy did could drive him away was a big part of their friendship. That and the fact that Katsuki was amazing. His drive to succeed was incredible, and his quirk was super versatile, perfect for hero work. Izuku wanted to help him achieve his goals, so the least he could do was try to keep him on the straight and narrow. And the least he could do was help keep his records clean. Thinking back on his childhood, he was really just a glorified punching bag for the other boy. They'd gotten better over the years. Katsuki still had an attitude problem but wasn't as mean. He didn't pick fights for no reason anymore. Some of the reasons that he did pick fights were a little flimsy though. Someone he didn't like talking to him really shouldn't have been a valid reason to fight someone. And his view on other people needed some work, but Izuku was pretty sure that trying to get Katsuki not to call people extras was a lost cause. Didn't mean he wouldn't try though. He zoned back into what the teacher at the front of the class was saying as his classmates all started displaying their quirks in a raucous display around him. Yes, you've got some very impressive quirks, but no power usage allowed in school. Izuku fought down the urge to scoff, then realized what a Kaken-like gesture it was. He'd clearly been hanging around the other boy too much. Hey teach, don't lump me in with these extras. And there was Katsuki, right on cue. I'm the real deal. These losers would be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some busted D-lister. There was that attitude problem that he'd been thinking about. Katsuki really needed to work on that if he was determined to be a popular hero. The class erupted into outraged chaos. Izuku sunk in his chair. Let's go, I'll take you all on. You've got impressive test results, the teacher mused. Maybe you will get into UA. The class broke out in whispers, for reasons Izuku was unsure of. Katsuki had made it clear that he was going to be a hero, and UA just made the most sense. All it took was a little common sense and it was obvious that Katsuki would be shooting for UA. And Katsuki was bragging again. He really needed to stop standing on his desk. Oh, and Midoriya wanted to go to UA too, didn't you? The room fell silent. Izuku huffed. Honestly. Was it so outlandish that he might want to go to the nation's top hero school? Then Katsuki's exploding palm was landing on his desk with a thwack. Anyone else would reel back, but Izuku just gave him a deadpan stare. Do you have some vendetta against desks? He snarked. You're worse than the rest of these DMN rejects, Katsuki snarled, you useless Deku. You don't even have a physical quirk. You'd get killed on the first day. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Well, what would you do if you had to fight someone with my quirk? Your explosions would hardly do anything, so you'd hardly have a physical quirk either. Please, you'd never be able to hang with the best of the best, Katsuki scoffed, hands blazing. I take back what I said about you dying on the first day. You wouldn't survive the exams. If that's what helps you sleep at night, Izuku said sweetly. The rest of the school day passed fairly uneventfully. Before he knew it, Izuku was packing away his schoolwork. The hero fight from the morning was all over the news, so he grabbed his notebook to quickly write down what he could remember. It was snatched out of his hands, and Izuku looked up to see Katsuki looming over him menacingly. Hi Kaken. Could I have that back please? Katsuki scowled, and his hands crackled with sparks. His hands that had Izuku's notebook in them. You may be fireproof, but your stuff sure isn't. Izuku sighed. Just because I want to go to the same hero school as you doesn't mean that you have free reign to destroy my things. Remember what your therapist said, you need to find healthier coping mechanisms. Did you break the stress ball I got for you? Don't even think about applying to UA Deku, Katsuki growled. Izuku batted his eyelashes and pouted theatrically. Afraid I'll show you up when your quirk doesn't work on me. Katsuki's scowl deepened. As if. I'm just afraid that you'll make our school seem like even more of a disappointment with your uselessness, he blustered. Sure, Kaken, Izuku said agreeably. Now could I please have my notebook back? Katsuki huffed and dropped the notebook onto Izuku's desk. Not like it'll help you. Well, you never know, Izuku said lightly. We still on for dinner at yours on Sunday? Like the old hag would let anything I say change her mind. Katsuki turned away and started walking to the door. I better not see you before then. I make no promises. Katsuki scoffed and left, his cronies trailing behind him. Izuku let out a breath he wasn't even aware that he was holding. He had a feeling that that conversation could have taken a very bad turn. Kaken had a sort of grudging respect for me, Izuku mused as he made his way home. I wonder if we'd be the same if my quirk didn't make me basically immune to his quirk. Probably not, in all honesty. The reason I'm so confident around him is because he can't do anything to physically hurt me. Our friendship is weird, sure, but he can't hurt me, and I can use that to make sure he doesn't hurt anyone. It's only due to my influence that he even considered going to therapy. And therapy's helped. He's a lot more mellow, less aggressive. He doesn't start as many fights, he's even started calling his lackeys by nicknames instead of calling them extras. Granted, I don't think he knows their actual names, I'm not even sure that he knows my actual name. And he still has a lot of issues, but he's doing so much better. He was just near the end of an underpass when he heard it. A gurgling noise was sounding around him, and he turned to see a mass of amorphous green slime towering over him. A villain? You'll make a perfect skin suit for me to hide in, kid, it burbled. Izuku was frozen in place. Come on legs, move. And then it was moving towards him. Izuku turned to run, but he didn't get more than a step away before it was on him, enveloping him. His notebook clattered to the ground. There was slime everywhere, in his mouth, around his torso. He couldn't breathe. Don't worry, I'm just taking over your body. It'll be easier for both of us if you don't fight back. It'll only hurt for a minute, you'll feel better soon. Izuku couldn't breathe. It felt like the sludge was down his throat and in his lungs. In that moment, he wished more than anything for a physical quirk, a useful quirk, anything that would help him. He tried to claw at the sludge, to pull it away from his mouth, but he may as well have been trying to pick up sand with a sieve. The slime slid under his fingers, unyielding. The sludge monster was saying something, but none of the words were processing. There were tears in his eyes. His feet kicked uselessly where they were hanging above the ground. No matter what he did, he was helpless. His struggling wasn't doing anything, just prolonging the inevitable. My body, it's getting weaker? His vision started to spin. I think I'm dying. His gaze, blurry as it was, landed on his notebook. It was open to one of his hero costume design pages. This can't be the end. Please, somebody, help me. There was a roar of flame, and Izuku knew no more. Toshinori Yagi had seen many strange things in his time as #1 hero. But this took the cake. He'd been tracking the sludge villain that had been running from him through the sewers. Sewers that, might he add, were not easy to navigate. Finally, he jumped out of the sewer grate into a scene that could have easily been from a horror movie. The sludge villain had been eviscerated, piles of limply twitching slime scattered around the underpass. And in the middle was the unconscious form of a young boy, maybe early teens, skin pale and sallow. The area around the boy's body was absolutely covered in scorch marks. He must have had a fire quirk of some kind, and a powerful one at that. Absently, Toshinori wondered if the boy had been planning on applying for UA. Then he shook that thought off, there were more important things to worry about here. First, the boy. He quickly knelt to take the boy's pulse, but reeled back as soon as his fingers made contact. The boy was burning, which just added to the fire quirk theory. Even with one for all activated, the boy was too hot to touch without risking serious burns. Toshinori quickly scooped the slime villain into a spare bottle, before calling an ambulance for the boy. Anonymously, of course, but he made sure to let them know that they'd need to bring someone who could manage intense heat. He didn't like it, but his time limit was running out, and he wasn't going to be able to wait for the ambulance to arrive. So, with regret pooling in his gut, Toshinori left the underpass. Izuku's first thought when he came to was, why is it so cold in here? His second thought was, I'm alive? He blinked a few times and his surroundings came into focus. He was in a hospital bed, in a cool hospital room. Across from him, his mother jumped out of her seat. Izuku! You're awake. Her hands fluttered over him for a second before she pulled him into a tight hug. Don't ever scare me like that ever again, Izuku. Izuku gave a weak cough. You're choking me, Mom. Inko drew back a little. What happened to you, Izuku? The nurse says that they got an anonymous call that you were found unconscious in an underpass on your way home from school, and you were too hot for them to touch. Izuku's head was spinning. Can I have a second? I need to collect my thoughts. Take all the time you need, honey, Inko reassured. I was walking home from school, Izuku said, and he took a deep breath. I was attacked by a villain. Inko gasped, but he kept going, and it tried to suffocate me. With slime. It was completely made out of sludge. I remember, before I passed out I heard fire. Did someone with a fire quirk save me? Inko blinked a few times. Okay. Honey, I think maybe we should book an appointment with a quirk specialist. You're just letting this go? No, we're coming back to this conversation later, and you're wrong if you think you're leaving my sight anytime soon, Inko said, running her hand through his hair. But superheating's never been a part of your quirk before, so I think we should, just in case there've been new developments. Izuku nodded. You're right. A cold shiver ran down his spine and he shuddered. Do you think we could go home? I'm really cold. They were in the car on their way home when Inko's tone turned serious again. Izuku, honey, I know that potential new developments with your quirk are probably really exciting for you, but I need you to promise me something. Izuku, in the back seat with the heaters turned up, made an affirmative noise. Promise me that until we see the quirk specialist, you won't experiment with your quirk. She sighed. I worry about you, you know? I get that I can't always protect you, but I'm still going to try when I can. Plus, she joked, if your quirk has more to do with heat than we first thought, I don't want the house burning down. I promise, Izuku said. Inko smiled. Thank you, honey. Izuku settled back into his seat, and cast a tired eye over his reflection in the window. His hair had always been a pretty plain forest green, the same color as his eyes. But now it had streaks of yellow, a patch of the cheerful color above each ear. It was the hair color change that had him believing his mother's quirk development theory. People's hair didn't just spontaneously change color. Or maybe it did and he was just weird. Either way, he couldn't wait to get home and go to sleep. The day had been very long, and he just wanted it to be over. The quirk specialist that Inko brought him to see was a tall woman with a dark shoulder-length hair that introduced herself as Mrs. Kamemoto. Her mouth and color-changing eyes had smile lines at the corners, and there was something about her that just put him at ease. Although that may have been because she had been the one to help him figure out his quirk in the first place. He had the extra toe joint seen in Quirkless people, and the first quirk doctor that his mother took him to try to diagnose him as quirkless. Okay, Ms. Kamemoto said, clapping her hands together. I normally don't do this except in special cases, but your mother requested that I use my quirk on you. Now, my quirk is the ability to temporarily activate other people's quirks. Izuku nodded. Like the opposite of Eraserhead. Mrs. Kamemoto laughed. Exactly. I just need you both to sign the consent forms and we can get started. Far too many papers, and about 5 minutes later saw Mrs. Kamemoto leading the two greenettes through the facility. She let them into a large room, mostly empty save for a cupboard set into one wall, and a viewing platform high on the wall across from it. This is the room where we go if I'm using my quirk on someone for the first time, just in case the quirk being activated is highly destructive. Mrs. Kamemoto shrugged. They're usually not, but it's better safe than sorry. Mrs. Midoriya, if you would please make your way up to the viewing platform? Inko drew Izuku into a quick hug. You're going to do great, honey, I believe in you. With Izuku's mother safely out of the way, Mrs. Kamemoto stood across the room from him. Just let me know when you want to start. Izuku took a deep breath. It wasn't unheard of for quirks to mutate when the user went through a traumatic experience. That was probably what happened to him. Or it could have been a fluke. When Mrs. Kamemoto used her quirk, he'd probably either heat up a lot, or nothing would happen. Although, if he could make himself super hot to the touch, he could probably find a way to apply that to hero work. He'd finally have an offensive ability. Stealing his nerves, Izuku nodded. I'm ready. Mrs. Kamemoto's eyes flashed red, and her hair floated up. Inko watched anxiously as Izuku was surrounded by a bright flash of light, and then he was gone. In his place was a bird? The bird was big, maybe a little larger than an eagle, with red-orange feathers and sharp, black-lined eyes. It had a mane of larger feathers in a line from the crown of its head and down its back, and its sleek tail feathers were even longer, fading from red at the base to orange and then to yellow at the tips. At the top of its head where the mane started were another two long red-orange-yellow feathers, which curled up and back in a similar way to All Might's hair. Mrs. Kamemoto's hair stopped floating. The bird unfurled its wings, which shared the same red-orange-yellow coloring as its tail feathers. It then proceeded to burst into flame. Inko burst into tears. So, Izuku's quirk wasn't heat immunity, like he'd always thought. No, his quirk was that he was a literal bird. A phoenix. A western phoenix. How did that even happen? Heat immunity made sense. The inside of his dad's mouth was impervious to heat, having it spread to Izuku's entire body was a logical next step. But a bird? Really? Not that it mattered now. He'd have to do some research onto western phoenix mythology. Maybe his phoenix form had powers that they weren't able to draw out. Over the course of the next few hours, they were able to draw out a number of new abilities. He could manipulate heat itself now, and although he couldn't make or generate it, he could shape and move it. He could put out fires by pulling the heat out of them. He could SCK the heat in through his skin and sort of store it in the hollow of his throat, and if he had enough stored up he could expel it from his mouth in an imitation of his father's fire breath. A fun thing that happened when he was actively using these abilities was that the yellow streaks in his hair turned into literal fire, which he could siphon a little bit of heat off. It kind of looked like All Might's hair, but smaller, which he was totally down for. And those were nothing compared to what he could do in Pheonix form. While transformed into the Firebird, his eyesight was so much sharper, and he could fly with his wings. He could generate, manipulate and absorb fire, and he could set his entire body alight in flames. And he was willing to bet that with practice he could control which parts of his bird body were set alight. Izuku ran out of time before he could test everything that he wanted to. He really wanted to see if he could partially transform, just the wings or the eyes or the claws, but he could probably do that later. He was incredibly excited about these new developments to his quirk. Before this, he'd been so sure that his only option for heroics was rescue, but now he finally had a way to fight villains. He could be a hero like All Might, and he couldn't be happier. Wait, how am I meant to train this? He thought out loud at the dinner table that night. Well, no one ever goes to Dagobah Beach, Inko mused. People just started dumping all their trash there, and now no one can stand the place. She sighed. It used to be so pretty there. In that split second, Izuku made a decision. Mom, I'm going to clean the beach. Inko blinked. Are you sure? It'll be a big job. If I'm going to get into UA, I'm going to have to be physically strong. Cleaning the beach will help me with that. Plus, it's a hero's job to give back to the community. Inko sniffled. Oh Izuku, you're too good. Dinner at Kaken's the next day was weird, to say the least. Izuku had convinced his mom not to say anything about the new developments to his quirk. He wanted to keep it to himself for now. Though when Katsuki snuck extra spice into his food Izuku hardly noticed, which was fun. Normally he'd have to make a mad dash for the kitchen and get a drink to wash his mouth out. Normally he'd poke fun at Katsuki, but instead he just sat there awkwardly as Katsuki blustered and Mitsuki ranted and raved, and Masaru and Inko shared a tired look. Minus his silence, it was pretty par for the course. He found himself getting cold a lot easier, which led to him wearing a lot more long-sleeved shirts and scarves. Gloves too. He'd even tried to wear beanies, but they didn't fit over his hair. When he brought this up to his mom, she'd simply smiled and given him a thick scarf in the same deep red as his favorite shoes. This used to belong to your father, Inko said, lips curved into a nostalgic smile. I think he'd be happy to see you wear it. One thing that Toshinori didn't expect to see during his weekly stare sadly at Dagobah Beach because it used to be so pretty but isn't any more time was what looked like the very boy he'd found in the underpass with the sludge villain, muttering to himself and struggling to move a fridge. He caught the tail end of the muttering as he approached. Who wondered if birds could cry? This kid, apparently. The boy looked up as Toshinori got closer. Hello sir. Can I help you? I was just wondering what you were doing, young man, Toshinori said. I come here every week, and I haven't seen you before. The boy straightened. Oh. I'm cleaning the beach. Toshinori blinked. An admirable goal, but may I ask why? Well, I was talking with my mom and she said she missed how pretty the beach used to be, the boy said, wringing his gloved hands together. And I'm planning on applying to U.A, so I'm using this as strength training as well. Toshinori nodded approvingly. That is very commendable of you, young man, but how are you planning on getting the trash from the beach to an actual dump site? The boy winced. I hadn't really thought that far yet. My quirk's heat-related, so I thought that maybe I could melt things into more manageable sizes, and carry them out myself. Or get a cart or something? I don't know. I know we've just met and I'm a stranger to you, but I have a truck that you could use, Toshinori offered. That would make it a lot easier, the boy mused. What's your name? Yagi Toshinori. Well, Mr. Yagi, I'm Midoriya Izuku, the boy said, smiling. We're not strangers anymore now, and I would really appreciate your help. Midoriya's cheerfulness was contagious, and Yagi couldn't help but smile back. I'm just sorting through some stuff right now, Midoriya said, but I think I'll be ready for the truck by this time next week. Toshinori's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't need to check it to know that it was Tsukachi, no one else texted him. I'm afraid I must be off now, young man, but I'll bring the truck around next week. Midoriya nodded and waved. Bye Mr. Yagi. Toshinori turned to make his way off of the beach. He'd have to find a truck now. Mr. Yagi was a weird one, Izuku mused. It had been a few months since they'd met, and his assistance had been insurmountably helpful. If he kept going at this rate, the beach would be clear by the entrance exam for UA. Izuku would sort the trash into manageable piles, and every day or so Mr. Yagi would drop by to load up his truck and take it away. And Izuku was definitely getting stronger if the way that the trash he was lifting didn't feel nearly as heavy as when he started was anything to go by. He made sure to only train his quirk when Mr. Yagi wasn't there, though. He didn't want to be arrested for public quirk usage. It was plain to see that his training was paying off. He'd been able to temporarily manifest the claws from his Pheonix form in place of his fingernails, and he was confident that with practice he could maintain the transformation for much longer. Another thing he was working on was manifesting the Pheonix wings. He really wanted to be able to fly as himself, rather than as a bird. He still couldn't create heat energy, and he doubted that he'd ever be able to, but he could shape it, siphoning the energy from his surroundings and channeling it into blasts of heat that turned even some of the hardier trash into piles of molten slag. He could take heat from anything, provided that it contained heat energy in the first place. It had the unfortunate effect of making the air around him really cold though, since he was taking the heat energy and moving it somewhere else. One good thing was that he had a seemingly infinite supply of heat energy in the forms of the little flames that lit up in his hair whenever he actively used his quirk. They didn't supply a lot of energy all at once, but so far testing was showing it to be limitless. The downside was that it took a long time for him to siphon off enough energy from them to create a blast of heat strong enough to do anything. He could technically take heat from himself, but the first time he tried he nearly blacked out from the sudden cold. Theoretically, he could probably do it without knocking himself out once he'd had more practice, but it required the kind of fine control that he just didn't have yet. One thing that I'd have to do if I get into U.A, he thought absently, is to design a support item to supply him with a surplus of heat energy. Either that or I'll have to find someone with a fire quirk who'd be willing to partner with me. His faux fire breath was getting stronger too. Izuku made a habit of bringing a lighter with him to his training sessions, to set little fires to steal heat energy from. It was at one such session where he decided to test the limits of how much heat he could absorb and store. He really should have stopped when he started coughing up smoke and his throat started glowing, but it was for science. He had to find out what would happen. Turns out, what happened was that he coughed up even more smoke, involuntarily threw up an enormous and uncontrollable ball of fire and passed out. When he woke up, the sand within about 12 meters in front of him had been turned to glass, and the trash around it scorched to high heaven, if not completely melted. Despite himself, he was very impressed. When he was actively breathing fire, the furthest he could get it to reach was a little under 5 meters. He'd measured it. It seemed that bottling up the heat energy for as long as he had increased the pressure, and it had erupted like a volcano, more than doubling his range. He'd have to work on that, if he could get it to the point where he could control it, maybe expelling the heat a second or so before it exploded out of him. That could be a really effective combat strategy. And he could put out the fires that it would inevitably start, which would help him start stocking up for the next blast. It was a win-win. And then there was his Pheonix form. It was kind of like a power-up. He could generate and control his own fire, which he swore sometimes flickered with a rainbow of colors not normally seen in fire, and there was seemingly no limit as to how long he could stay transformed. Izuku had done a lot of research into the mythology of the Pheonix, and from what he'd learned, Phoenixes had a lot of powers that he either didn't have or hadn't unlocked yet. The ability to teleport using fire was something he was very interested in. Warping quirks were so rare, and if he could potentially mimic one, then there were so many ways he could apply that to hero work. Healing tears was pretty cool too. Being able to heal on the battlefield would be super useful. Nothing like that had made any signs of appearing though, he sulked. Could birds even cry? Izuku was a buzzing bundle of anxious nerves. Not his best metaphor, but he was too wound up to care. The first thing he'd seen on the news that day was that the sludge villain who'd attacked him had escaped from prison. You couldn't blame him for being scared. He'd almost died, for All Might's sake. He was allowed to be frightened of the guy who'd nearly killed him. He was nervous walking to school, too nervous to even think about paying attention to the teacher during class. Even Katsuki picked up on it, which was saying something. "What's your problem, Deku?" Katsuki barked, slamming sparking hands onto Izuku's desk. The final bell for the day had already rung and all their classmates had filed out, so it was just the two of them in the classroom. "Oh, I don't know, Kaken," Izuku said snappishly. "Maybe I'm a little wound up because the villain that almost killed me escaped from jail? Maybe I have the right to be nervous, considering he tried to suffocate me to death and use my body as a flesh puppet." Katsuki's mouth gaped. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said eventually. Izuku snorted. "You wouldn't have cared. The only reason you put up with me is that you can't drive me away." Katsuki's hands balled into fists, maybe to smother the sparks that were certainly present. He looked away, eyes narrowed, and muttered something that Izuku didn't quite hear. If he didn't know the other boy better, he'd have sworn that he said, "I care about you." "What, Kaken? I didn't quite catch that." "You're a constant," Katsuki said begrudgingly, not looking at him. "If you're not around it'll be weird. And I'm the only one who's allowed to be mean to you, got it?" Izuku's breath caught in his throat. "Kaken. You're the only person who's my friend for me, not for my quirk," Katsuki admitted, "so if you're scared of this villain, I'll walk you home. The villain won't even touch you, I'll kick his butt if he tries." Hot tears pricked at the corners of Izuku's eyes, and he frantically wiped them away. "You think we're friends? That means a lot, Kaken." Katsuki huffed. "Just until they catch this bastard and put him back behind bars, okay? Don't get the wrong idea, Deku." Izuku smiled. "Sure, Kaken." They were about halfway home when Izuku's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to check it. "Mom, hey Izuku, could you please pick up some milk for me on your way home?" "Mom, thanks honey," smiley face. "Can we make a quick detour to the grocery store?" Izuku asked, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "Mom's asked me to pick up some milk." Katsuki gave an exaggerated groan. "Make it quick." The detour didn't take too long, and they were approaching the grocery store within minutes. "I'll wait out here," Katsuki said, folding his arms and leaning against the wall. "Don't get arrested," Izuku joked before ducking inside the store. He was stepping out of the store, milk in hand, when the explosion started. A crowd had gathered, and there was fire and heroes everywhere. He recognized Backdraft trying to put out the fires, as well as various other pro-heroes standing around, doing nothing. Why were they doing nothing? And then he saw it, the sludge villain who'd attacked him. Had it really been 4 months since then? It didn't feel like it, instead it felt like it was just yesterday, and the feeling only grew stronger when Izuku's gaze landed on spiky blonde hair and crimson eyes, the rest of his best, and only, friend enveloped in green gunk. This was all his fault. If Katsuki hadn't been walking with him he wouldn't have been attacked. Before he even registered that his feet were moving, Izuku was pushing through the crowd and racing forward. He vaguely heard the heroes yelling at him to get back. The fires lit by Kaken's explosions roared around him, and Izuku yanked the heat towards him. The flame snuffed, Izuku could feel the telltale sign of smoke collecting in his throat. If Katsuki's explosions didn't do anything, Izuku's heat blast wouldn't do anything either. If only he could do something real, something substantial. The feeling of helplessness from his own encounter with the sludge villain came to mind, the way he'd wished more than anything that he could save himself. There was a rush of heat behind him, and the smoke disappeared from Izuku's throat. And suddenly he was flying, ramming through the sludge villain and out the other side with Kaken's wrist firmly in his grasp. "What are you waiting for?" Izuku screamed. "The fires are out. You can take him down." Katsuki spluttered in his grasp, and Izuku carefully put him down a safe distance away. "Deku," Katsuki said, and Izuku risked a glance down at him. His friend was deathly pale, and there was something like fear in his eyes. "Since when did you have Fing wings?" He turned to look. Now, normally he didn't swear, but holy shit. He had wings. The feathery appendages had ripped through the back of his uniform, and the black fabric of said uniform was burning, though he couldn't feel it. And speaking of burning, the red-orange-yellow feathers, like the wings of his phoenix form, were literally on fire, bright flames flickering across the impressive wingspan. The wings were bigger than those of his phoenix form though, while the bird's wingspan was a little over 2 meters from wingtip to wingtip, the wingspan of the wings he had now was easily double that. He zoned back into his surroundings to hear Katsuki yelling at him. "Deku! You're on fire!" Izuku gave him a deadpan look. "No kidding. No, your uniform is on fire." Right. He'd absently noticed that before but hadn't really registered it. Because he'd finally manifested the phoenix wings as a human. He quickly sucked the heat out of the flames burning his uniform, and while he was at it put out all the fires in the alley around him. Normally, taking in that much heat energy would have smoke tickling at the roof of his mouth, but his mouth stayed smoke-free. Weird. "Turn the wings off and let's get out of here," Katsuki said angrily, "so you can explain what the hell just happened." "I don't know how." "What? This is the first time this has happened. I don't know how to get rid of them." "It's your quirk, how can you not know how to control it?" "I'd like to see you control random wings that just showed up for the first time. I could do it better than you. Wanna bet?" There was a blast of air, and Izuku fought down the urge to curse. He'd been so enveloped in making sure Kaken was safe, and then caught up in the fact that he'd finally manifested the wings that he'd completely forgotten about the villain. He turned, and was that All Might standing in the mouth of the alleyway? It was, the #1 hero dwarfing the other pros in sheer stature alone. Katsuki's hand wrapped around his wrist, and then Izuku was being pulled in All Might's direction. When had the other boy even gotten off of the ground? Come on, Deku, Katsuki spat. We're getting out of here so you can give me a proper explanation. Kaken, it's All Might, we can't just leave. This might be my only chance to get his autograph. Katsuki huffed. With your luck you'll probably get caught up in another of his fights by the end of the week. It's Thursday, Izuku said flatly. You heard me, Katsuki said without looking back at him. Kaken, Izuku pleaded. Nope, we're leaving. But it's All Might. Leaving. Kaken. Katsuki threw his hands up. Fine. 2 minutes, then we're going and you're giving me an explanation. And for your sake, it better be a good one. Izuku beamed. Kaken, you're the best. Katsuki ended up not getting an explanation, as Mitsuki showed up and proceeded to drag her son away, and Inko refused to let Izuku out of her sight for the next 3 days. And he hadn't even gotten All Might's autograph, the hero in question disappearing from the scene before Izuku had plucked up the courage to talk to him. Inko still allowed him to go to Dagoba Beach to continue with cleaning it, but insisted on coming along to keep an eye on him. It was under her careful supervision that Izuku was able to experiment with manifesting the wings. The thing about the wings, Izuku discovered after rigorous testing, was that in order to manifest them, he had to have at least a certain amount of heat energy stored up. This heat energy was then transferred into the wings. When he used them at all, the heat energy was transferred into kinetic energy, and when all of the heat energy had been converted, the wings disappeared. The more heat energy he had stored when he manifested the wings, the longer he could keep them up for. If he stole heat energy from his surroundings while he had the wings manifested, unless he was specifically focused on storing it, the energy went straight to maintaining the wings. He could siphon heat energy off of the wings, but that would cause them to disappear much quicker. It was the same for flying with them. He could fly, but it caused the heat energy to convert into kinetic at a faster rate. It was really cool, but unless Izuku's back was bare they would burn a hole through the back of his shirt, so if he wanted to use them for hero work he'd have to make some edits to his hero costume designs. Now that he thought about it, unless he wanted to train shirtless he'd have to invest in some shirts that were made for people with wing quirks. He may be fireproof, but his clothes sure weren't. It was at one such beach training session with his mother that Mr. Yagi showed up again, for the first time since Katsuki had been attacked by the sludge villain. Izuku couldn't help but feel slightly awkward as he introduced him to Inko. It wasn't every day that your son introduces you to a random man who'd been helping him with cleaning a beach who you'd only heard vague things about. Of course Izuku had already told her that someone was helping him, but still. First meetings like this were always a little weird, he assumed. He hadn't been in any first meetings like this, but it seemed like it would be. Young Midoriya, I have something to tell you, Mr. Yagi said after introductions were done. Whatever you have to tell him, I'm hearing it too, Inko butted in. Forgive me for my rudeness, but it's a mother's duty to be suspicious of strangers making friends with her teenage son. Mr. Yagi nodded. A very wise philosophy, Mrs. Midoriya. But I'm afraid I must ask you both to promise that you spread what I'm about to tell you around. Is it some kind of secret? Izuku asked. Indeed, my boy. I promise to keep it quiet. I do too, Inko said, provided that it does not put my son in undue danger. It shouldn't, Mr. Yagi said, taking a deep breath. You see, I am a pro-hero dash. At this he paused. It's probably easier to just show you. There was a burst of steam surrounding him, then standing before them in Mr. Yagi's place was All Might's hulking figure. Inko gasped. Izuku did not scream. He might have yelped. But he didn't scream. Definitely not. You see why I asked you to keep this a secret? All Might, Mr. Yagi, Mr. Might? Asked, voice booming. Mom, I accidentally made friends with All Might, Izuku said weakly. You're grounded for a week, Inko said back, equally weakly. All Might, looked between the two of them with a chuckle. My quirk has the ability to be passed on from one user to the next. My mentor passed it to me, her mentor passed it to her, and so on, all the way back to the very first user. Why are you telling us this? There was another puff of steam and All Might seemed to deflate, and the skeletal form of Mr. Yagi was in front of them once more. About 6 years ago I sustained an injury in a fight with a villain that rendered me unable to maintain my All Might form for extended PRDS of time. Izuku racked his brain for big fights that All Might had been in 6 years ago. I thought you came out of your fight with Toxic Chainsaw without any serious injuries? That's one impressive memory you have there, but that's not the fight I was referring to. We were able to keep the battle under wraps, and the villain who I fought was vanquished, Mr. Yagi said. I do not believe that I will be able to keep being All Might for much longer, so I've been looking for a successor. Izuku's brain ground to a halt. If this was going where he thought it was going. I saw how you ran in to save your friend, risking your own safety. My legs moved and I was running in before I realized I was moving at all, Izuku said. I saw Kaken being hurt and nothing else mattered. I didn't even have time to think. A large hand came to rest on his shoulder, and Izuku looked up into Mr. Yagi's sunken eyes. There are stories about every hero, how they became great. Most have one thing in common: their bodies moved before they had a chance to think, almost on their own. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. Today, that's what happened to you. I believe that you are worthy of my power, should you choose to inherit it. Eating hair was gross. There was a phantom feeling of it sticking to the back of Izuku's throat, and he didn't like it. It seemed like only yesterday that Mr. Yagi had revealed one for all to him and his mother. Izuku had accepted, of course he did. No sane person would turn down All Might's quirk, and the 6 months between then and now had been crammed with a grueling exercise regimen in order to prepare his body to receive the quirk. Mr. Yagi's warning about his body exploding if he wasn't physically strong enough still rang in his ears, even now. He'd never been gladder that he started cleaning the beach as strength training when he did. If he hadn't, then he wasn't sure that he would have been ready for it. Even now, it had been close. Mr. Yagi had only deemed him ready to receive it that morning. And here he was, standing in front of the UA gates on the day of the entrance exam, nerves prickling under his skin and scarf pulled up over his chin. On one of their monthly video calls, Hisashi said it had brought him luck when he wore it, so Izuku was hoping it would do the same for him. And it was fireproof too. That same night Inko had told him that Hisashi had gotten cold easily like him, so had the same propensity for scarves, but had given it to her as a going-away gift when he had to leave. Physically, Izuku was a near clone of his mother, but it seemed that he took after his father in multiple other ways. It was comforting to know that he was similar to the man, even though he was on a different continent. The red fabric of the scarf was soft as he buried his face in it. With the exhausting exercise regimen that he'd been on over the past 6 months, he hadn't had a whole lot of time to work on the physical aspects of his first quirk. He'd updated the registry to match the new aspects of his quirk. Inko suggested the name Pheonix for his quirk, and although it was a little on the nose, it was accurate, so. Nevertheless, the name worked, which was all he could ask for. Not everyone had super cool quirk names. His spare time was taken up almost entirely by research, which had caused Izuku to gain a healthy terror of using his quirk to take heat energy from living organisms. Losing enough heat to bring a human body down by 2 degrees Celsius was enough to give the person hypothermia, and if he took much more he could kill them. Needless to say, he wasn't planning on using that facet of his quirk as anything but a last resort. Izuku took a deep breath. Mr. Yagi's advice on how to activate one for all hadn't been very helpful, but he had Pheonix behind him, so he wasn't especially worried about using it for the exam. He'd spent a lot of time studying for the written exam, so he was fairly confident about his chances with it, but the practical exam might prove to be a problem. He could only hope that he didn't have to fight actual people. His control was pretty good, but there was always the risk of badly burning his opponents, or worse, the other examinees. His Pheonix flame was hotter than regular fire, so he had to be careful with it. Okay. He'd spent enough time just standing outside the gates. People were starting to look at him weirdly. It was time to get moving. One step forward, everything went wrong and he tripped over his own 2 feet. So, he thought as he toppled towards the pavement, this is how it ends. I'm a literal bird of legend and the successor to the symbol of peace, and I've been bested by a walkway. There's no coming back from this. Fingers brushed against his back, and he was suspended in the air. He looked up to see his savior, a girl, shorter than him with rosy cheeks and brown hair. Are you okay? She asked, helping him back to his feet. I stopped you with my quirk. I'm sorry I didn't ask first, but I figured you'd be fine with me catching you. Yeah, thanks, Izuku said. He rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. It's probably not the best sign to faceplant on my way in, huh? Probably not, the girl said cheerfully. Isn't this way nerve-wracking? You said it. I've been training for a while, but I'm still pretty nervous about the practical. Well, good luck, the girl said. I'm Uraraka Ochiko, by the way. Midoriya. Someone pushed roughly past him, nearly sending him sprawling, again. He looked up to see a head of spiky blonde hair scowling at him. Deku, stop wasting time talking to extras, Katsuki snapped. Let's go. Coming Kaken. Izuku yelped. I'll probably see you inside, Uraraka. Good luck. He dashed after the explosive blonde and fell into step beside him. You still owe me an explanation, Katsuki said, not looking at him. And you'll get your explanation after the exam, Izuku hissed. This is important, Kaken, we don't have time for distractions right now. Katsuki huffed, and the rest of their walk was silent. The written portion passed in what seemed like a flash, and before he knew it he was making his way into a crowded auditorium. Shortly after filing into their seats, a series of spotlights lit up the stage where present Mike was standing. Now, Izuku knew that the staff of UA was made up of pro heroes, but it was another thing to see one of them standing in front of him. After a very lackluster reaction to present Mike's attempt to get a response out of them, the pros seemed to give up and got straight to business, explaining the mock battle setup. "So, they're splitting us up so we can't work with any of our friends," Katsuki muttered. Izuku snuck a look at the other boy's exam ticket. Kaken was in Battle Center A, while Izuku was in Battle Center B. "Makes sense," he mused. "Though pro heroes do have to work in teams on the field. Maybe they want to see how we work when stuck by ourselves? But what happens if there's more entrants from one school than there are battle centers? They'd have to stick more than one in one center, though I suppose that's better than having the whole group in one spot." Katsuki elbowed him in the ribs. "Shut up. There are 3 types of foe villains in every testing center," Present Mike announced. "You'll earn points based on their level of difficulty, so better choose wisely. Your goal in this trial is to use your quirk to raise your score by shredding these foe villains like a mid-song guitar solo." That was quite the simile. But what if your quirk required something that the testing center didn't supply? Were you allowed to bring something along to give yourself a fair chance? Like, if Izuku's own quirk didn't allow him to supply his own heat energy via the fire from his Pheonix form, would he be able to apply to bring a lighter? And what about non-physical quirks? A brainwashing or intelligence quirk would be incredibly useful on the field, but here they were nearly useless. "Excuse me, sir, but I have a question." A spotlight lit up an examinee with dark blue hair, the light gleaming on his glasses. "On the printout you've listed 4 types of villains, not 3. With all due respect, if this is an error on official UA materials, it is shameful. We are exemplary students. We expect the best from Japan's most notable school. A mistake such as this simply won't do." Izuku shrunk in his seat as the boy's striking gaze turned on him. It felt like the other examinee's disapproving eyes were boring a hole through his skull. "And you? With the red scarf. You've been muttering this entire time. If you can't be bothered taking this seriously, leave, you're distracting the rest of us." "Kaken, kill me now," Izuku whispered. "I'm never living this down." "It's far funnier to let you live," Katsuki whispered back. "Your entertainment value makes you too interesting to die." Izuku sulked and turned his attention back to present Mike, who was explaining the function of the final robot. It wasn't worth any points, so Izuku hoped it wouldn't show up around wherever he was in the testing center. So, this was it. Time to put his 10 months of training to use. Clothes made for wing-type quirks tended not to have long sleeves, so he wore a high-collared dark green halter neck as an undershirt, with a plain black long-sleeved shirt over it. It'd burn away if he had to break out the wings, but at least he wouldn't end up fully shirtless. He deemed his trademark red shoes sturdy enough for this, so wore those as well, and finally a pair of green-blue tracksuit pants with a black stripe down each side. Finally, he'd swapped out his regular gloves for a fingerless pair made of fireproof material. They'd cost him most of his savings, but the fireproof material was too enticing to pass up. It wasn't the most fashionable of outfits, but that wasn't really the point. He was going for function, not form. To one side of the pack of students he spotted Uraraka, the nice girl who had prevented him from face-planting. She looked a little nervous, so he started to make his way in her direction. The least he could do after she saved him was to offer a pep talk. A heavy hand landed on his shoulder, and Izuku turned to see the owner of the hand was the severe teen who'd called him out before. "She looks like she's trying to focus on the trials ahead," the teen said, putting his hands on his hips. "What are you planning on doing? Distracting her and ruining her chance to succeed?" "Oh, no," Izuku spluttered, waving his hands. "She just looked a little nervous, and she saved me from falling over on my way in, so I thought I could return the favor." "She isn't falling," the teen said skeptically. "Right, let's start." Present Mike called from the top of a concrete tower. How'd he even get up there? "Get moving. There are no countdowns in real battles. Run, 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 little listeners. You're wasting airtime here." There was a blur of movement, the pack of students taking off and leaving Izuku in the dust. He took a deep breath, and leapt into the air. His transformation was seamless, and he quickly overtook the leader of the pack, who actually was the teen who'd stopped him from talking to Uraraka. How'd he get there so fast? They started at the same point. One thing that he didn't want was to burn any of the other test takers. So, by that logic, he should fly as fast as he can to the other side of the testing site, and work his way back towards the group. That way by the time he got back to the pack he should have enough points to pass, and that was assuming he made it back to them before time ran out. But you know what they say about the best laid plans. The first problem that arose was the sheer enormity of the testing site. Even at his top speed, it'd probably take him half the allotted testing time to reach the other side. Instead he spent maybe 2 minutes flying outward until he reached an area with a decent amount of robots that was far enough away from the other test takers that he should have a solid few minutes before they reached him. Flames flickered over his feathers as his form lit on fire, and Izuku sent a steady stream of flame at a one-pointer experimentally. It took longer than he would have liked for the one-pointer to melt into a pile of smoking slag. While training he could incinerate a heap of trash about the same size in seconds. These must have been made of more fire-resistant metal. Nonetheless, his first foe was down, and he was forced to turn his attention to the other robots. His Pheonix form was quick and nimble, so weaving out of the way of their attacks wasn't difficult. It was taking them down that was the hard bit. Well, more tedious than hard, but still. There was a limit to how much firepower he had when in Pheonix form before he had to switch back, and if he kept going at this rate he'd hit that limit far before the testing time ran out. He absently wondered how Katsuki was doing. The other boy's explosions packed more of a punch than Izuku's fire, and he'd been training with it for much longer. Izuku upped the heat on the flames coating his body and rammed into a two-pointer. His fires got weaker the further away from him they were, so maybe direct contact would be a more efficient way of taking them down. The two-pointer shuddered back and crashed to the ground, so it looked like being a flaming battering ram would work better. It hurt, so he'd try not to hit them harder than he needed to. He'd taken down maybe a dozen more robots and was in the middle of burning a hole through the head of a one-pointer by the time he and the other examinees started to cross paths. One of the first on the scene was the severe teen who'd called him out not once, but twice. Of course he was. Izuku was going to have to regulate his flames now. Great. Just wonderful. Speaking of, the area around him was blazing quite cheerfully, so he dropped to the ground and turned human again. He reached out to the flames burning around him and snuffed them, pulling the heat towards him and away from the other examinees. His throat warmed with the stored power. Okay. He could do this. If he'd done the math right he should have 27 points, so he'd definitely need to beat more robots if he wanted to pass. Though he was going to have to restrain himself now. He didn't want to burn anyone. More examinees came rushing in, though he didn't recognize anyone among them. None of them looked like their quirks would grant them any form of fire resistance, so he kept a tight lid on the heat burning in his throat. Smoke hadn't started to collect in his mouth yet, so he wasn't in danger of exploding. Yet. He was fine. A little banged up, but fine. Izuku took off in the direction that the others had come from. Maybe there'd be some stragglers he could pick off? Instead of having to fight the robots with people around them, he could fight them instead. He still didn't have the kind of control needed to avoid burning people close by. Wait. Was that an earthquake? The ground was shaking under his feet. A monstrosity of a robot rumbled down the faux street, smashing buildings and generally causing havoc. Debris from broken buildings crashed to the ground around the fleeing examinees as the robot crushed one corner of a building with what seemed like no effort at all. He was willing to bet that this was the zero-pointer, but how was UA going to stop it from killing people? Sure, they could probably control it. Remotely, but still. They couldn't control environmental factors like rubble and falling debris, and Recovery Girl couldn't heal everything. Okay. The situation was bad, but manageable. Izuku was a pretty fast runner, and he was confident that he could get out of here and find some more robots to fight before time was up. Wait. There was someone trapped in the zero-pointer's path. Legs trapped under rubble, and crying out in pain was Uraraka, struggling to pull herself out from under the debris keeping her in place. She'd saved him before, now it was his turn to repay the favor. He wasn't strong enough to lift the rubble, so he'd have to take down the zero-pointer before it squashed her. Before he even realized he was moving he was leaping into the air, flaming wings flaring out from behind him. His mouth opened and he breathed out as much heat as he could without rapidly losing the wings. But it was no good. The heat melted part of the zero-pointer's front, however the monstrosity wasn't even slowing down. Izuku had to do something. His arms were tingling. He did a loop to build momentum, a power that had to be one for all surging through his right arm. Energy lanced over his skin in crackling green bursts. And smash! His fist impacted into the head of the zero-pointer and the robot crumpled, explosions crackling throughout its joints and stray pieces crashing to the ground away from him. His wings snuffed out, and he was falling. The arm he'd punched the zero-pointer with flapped uselessly, and the excruciating pain radiating from it was stopping him from being able to focus on transforming. This was bad. This was very bad. Passing the exam would mean nothing if he was flattened into a pancake before it even finished. He tried to grab onto the heat emanating from the exploding zero-pointer, but there wasn't enough to summon the wings again. The ground was approaching fast, far too quickly for Izuku's tastes. Then slap. Something impacted the side of his face, and Izuku stopped falling. He was floating just above the ground, so close he could reach out and touch it. Release, a familiar voice gasped out, and Izuku tumbled to the ground. Izuku averted his eyes as Uraraka threw up. The pain in his arm was making him inclined to do the same thing. No, he didn't have time to throw up. He highly doubted that 27 points was enough to pass, and if he didn't get in, then all the training that Mr. Yagi helped him with was for nothing. He struggled to his feet, only for Present Mike to call out that time was up. His arm throbbed painfully and he flopped back to the ground. Ugh. Did phoenixes have healing tears, like he'd read? There were definitely tears dripping down his face, though they were tears of pain rather than sorrow. Did that matter? Either way, he probably didn't have healing tears. He'd cried enough that if his tears did have healing properties he'd have noticed by now. He zoned back into his surroundings to see a woman he vaguely recognized as the heroin recovery girl making her way towards him. She kissed him on the arm and shoved some gummies into his other hand before bustling off to attend to other examinees. And that was that. Izuku went home with a heavy heart, and Kaken still hadn't gotten his explanation. He got in. He got in. So, rescue points were a thing. All of his angsting was for nothing. The 45 rescue points added to his 27 villain points added up to a neat 72, which meant he was the third-place scorer in the entire exam, only behind Kaken and someone called Kirishima Aijuru. The first day of school came, and Inko waved tearfully from the door as Izuku left the house. And now he was standing in front of the truly massive door leading to his homeroom class. He took a deep breath and pulled his scarf to sit a little more snugly around his chin. The principal had given him permission to wear it and a pair of gloves during school time, which was nice of him. The heat energy he'd stored before leaving the house was warm in the hollow of his throat. He always tried to keep a little heat with him, just in case he needed it, but today he'd tried to gather more than he normally would. He had a feeling that he'd need it. Okay. He could do this. With any luck, his new classmates would be nice and wouldn't say anything about his scarf and gloves. Izuku stepped into the classroom and immediately took it back. The stern teen from the exam was standing across the room, engaged in a heated debate with Katsuki. Well, perhaps debate wasn't the right word. It was more along the lines of him telling Katsuki off, and Katsuki biting back because he was confrontational like that. He did his best impression of a stealth-type quirk user and tried to slink around the side unnoticed. Tried being the key word there. The boy with the blue hair spotted him immediately and began marching towards him. My name is Ida Tenya Dash. I know, I overheard, Izuku said, a little nervous. I'm Midoriya Izuku, it's nice to meet you. Midoriya, Ida started solemnly, you realized there was something more to the practical exam, didn't you? You must be very perceptive, I must ask your forgiveness for misjudging you so harshly. I admit, as a student you're far superior to me. I find that hard to believe. Wait, did he say that out loud? Whoops. I must ask, however, Ida continued, are you aware that scarves aren't part of the school uniform? I got special permission to wear them, Izuku quickly defended himself, my quirk makes me feel the cold really harshly. Hey, I recognize you. A cheerful voice chirped from behind him. Midoriya, right? You saved me in the entrance exam. I don't know why you were so worried, you took out that 0-pointer in just one punch. It was amazing. Izuku pulled his scarf up to hide his embarrassed blush. The punch was something new, I didn't really dash. He was interrupted by an enormous yellow cocoon appearing just outside of the classroom door and proceeding to insult them. The caterpillar then revealed itself to be a, oddly familiar, worn-out-looking man who introduced himself as Aizawa, their homeroom teacher. Right, let's get to it. Aizawa rifled through his sleeping bag and pulled out what looked like some form of gym uniform. There are more of these up the front. Put them on and head outside. Get to it. Aizawa slunk out of the room like a tired caterpillar, leaving the rest of them standing there in shock. That was, certainly one way to make an impression. Turns out, instead of orientation Aizawa was going to have them do a quirk assessment test. Great. Izuku's quirk was fairly versatile, but he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to apply it to some of the tests. Plus, he only had so much heat energy stored. Then he watched Katsuki launch a softball into the stratosphere, with a shouted die, and felt even less confident. And finally what nerves he had left were eliminated when Aizawa declared that the lowest scoring student would be expelled immediately. The first test was a 50-meter dash. He considered stealing the energy from Kaken's explosions, but very quickly decided against that course of action. He did not want to die today, thank you very much. His Pheonix form could get up to some pretty high speeds, but it took time to reach that velocity. He could fly the 50 meters, there was just the question of whether it'd be faster to run or to fly. It would probably be faster to fly, now that he thought about it. His race was against Katsuki. Despite the fact that it had been months since the second sludge villain attack, he still hadn't given Kaken an explanation, something the other teen wasn't too happy about. Izuku rolled his shoulders and shifted into his bird form, flapping his wings and flying a couple of loose figure eights above the group to warm up, pun fully intended. Aizawa called him and Katsuki over to start the race. For some reason, Izuku flew faster when he was on fire, so as soon as the shot that signaled the start of the race sounded, he let flame flicker over his feathers and took off like a shot. Even though he was trying to fly as fast as he could, he simply didn't have enough distance to reach his highest horizontal speed. Still, his time was decent, 4.03 seconds. A tenth of a second faster than Kaken, he noted somewhat smugly. He didn't have much of a plan for the second trial, the grip strength test. He couldn't control one for all without turning his bones into confetti, so that was off the table. And he didn't particularly want to melt the measuring device, so his own 2 hands it was. He managed to score 52 kilograms, which was pretty good for a baseline human, but nothing compared to his classmates with quirks that augmented their strength. In comparison to the grip test, the standing long jump was a piece of cake. He started the jump human and switched at the apex of his leap, then cleared the sandbox with ease. The fourth test, repeated side steps, was another tricky one. Flying wouldn't help him, and he couldn't use heat energy to buffer him between the lines. So, like the grip test, he put his quirk on the back burner, pun fully intended, and attempted to do his best without the use of any quirk. Ever since his quirk mutated, he'd been a lot more nimble, and cleaning the beach had increased his stamina tenfold, so he was able to secure a decent score. If Izuku had done the math right, he should be about the middle of the pack, his long jump and 50-meter scores making up for his mediocre repeated side step and grip test ones. A ball throw marked the 5th test. This was another test where Pheonix wouldn't help much. He didn't think that burning, or all might forbid melting, the ball would get him a particularly good score. There were only 3 more tests after this: endurance run, seated toe touch and sit-ups. Pheonix wouldn't necessarily help with the seated toe touch or sit-ups, though he could hold his bird form for a long time, so he'd use that for the endurance run. It technically wouldn't be a run anymore, but Aizawa hadn't seemed to have a problem with him flying for the 50-meter sprint, so it would probably be fine. Probably. That meant he had to think of something to do for the ball throw, seated toe touch and sit-ups. Absently, he wondered how necessary his arms would be for the latter too. He could use one for all to throw the ball. It would break his arm, but his pain tolerance was pretty good. It would still hurt, a lot, but if he could grit his teeth and bear it, then maybe a high score in the ball throw would propel him away from that dreaded 20th place. Izuku was brought out of his musings by Aizawa signaling for him to take his place on the pitch. He windmilled his throwing arm consideringly. Was he really prepared to break his arm to avoid expulsion from his dream school? Yes. Yes, he was. He took a deep breath and, willing one for all to simmer under his skin, threw the ball with all his might. It flew maybe 10 meters before flopping to the ground. Izuku blinked disbelievingly. He'd been trying to use one for all, hadn't he? The scarf around Aizawa's neck snapped out and wrapped tight around him. Izuku choked. He knew this guy seemed familiar. "You're Eraserhead." Aizawa gave him a look that was somewhere between a sarcastic "no kidding" and an eternally tired "kill me now." "Were you about to break your bones again, counting on someone else to save your useless body?" "My pain tolerance is high," Izuku defended. "Injuries I sustain in one form don't carry over to the other, and I don't need both arms for sit-ups or toe touches." It was a logical decision. "If you break your arm, I'll expel you where you stand," Aizawa said flatly. "You'll be nothing but a liability if you can only throw a single punch before breaking." His capture weapon back around his neck and eyes no longer glowing, Aizawa turned away. "Take your final throw." Izuku took a deep breath and desperately sought to calm his nerves. Okay. He was pretty sure that he wasn't in last place, but he still wasn't exactly comfortable with his placement. New plan. He could move heat energy, but could that energy help propel the ball? The explosion that occurred when he had too much heat stored might have the force required to propel the ball a decent distance. It technically wouldn't be breaking his arm either. And if he'd been getting a lot better at not passing out when overheating, he only lost consciousness about half of the time. Plus, he'd measured how long he passed out for, and it averaged about a minute, which wasn't too bad. It was a risk, but one worth taking. "Can I steal Bakugo for a second?" he asked. Aizawa gave him a long, tired stare and Izuku was quick to elaborate. "I'm not going to break my bones, but I need more heat energy." Aizawa sighed and motioned for Katsuki to come over. "Hey Kaken," Izuku chirped, batting his eyelashes, "could you pretty please make some explosions for me?" Katsuki scowled. "Only if you actually give me a DMN explanation." Done. They shook hands and the deal was made. Heat crackled in the blonde's palms. Izuku was quick to sweep it up, as well as siphoning energy from his hair flames until he could taste the smoke collecting in his mouth. "Thanks, Kaken," he said, moving his mouth as little as possible. "Now if everyone could move back please? It's gonna get pretty hot." Both his friend and his teacher looked a little disturbed by the black wisps escaping from his lips, but the whole class dutifully moved away. He coughed, and more smoke slipped free. Okay, the plan was working. But this would depend on timing. He needed to throw the ball just before the heat exploded out, so that the force from the explosion could propel the ball the maximum distance. It had gotten to the point where he could tell with decent accuracy when he'd lose control, so he very carefully waited a few more seconds until he could feel the pressure building. Timing was imperative. The heat built until Izuku couldn't hold it anymore and he lobbed the ball as hard as he could. The energy erupted out in a huge blast, and Izuku fought to keep consciousness. He pulled weakly at the heat, threatening to get too close to his classmates. The least he could do is make sure they don't get burned. He blinked dark spots out of his eyes. When did he end up on the ground? He didn't remember falling. Deku. Ah yes, Kaken, right on schedule. Since when could you do that, you little dash? He was cut off by Aizawa, eyes glowing red and capture weapon flaring. Izuku gave their teacher a dazed little smile. See? No broken bones. The last 3 tests passed in a blur, and Izuku was quite happy to see his name sitting comfortably in 6th. Less happy was the 20th placer, the little boy with purple ball instead of hair. By the way, I was lying about expelling the last placer, Aizawa said flatly. It was a logical ruse in order to bring out your best. I'm surprised the rest of you didn't figure that out, the tall girl with the ponytail said, giving them an odd look. I guess I probably should have said something. Aizawa slouched off with the parting instructions of them picking up a syllabus in the classroom, though he did cast an assessing look at Izuku before he left. Day over and tired as the grave, Izuku was stopped on his way off school grounds by a firm hand on his shoulder. I didn't get the chance to ask before, but are you all right? Ida asked. That explosion was rather large. Izuku shrugged. The force knocked me over, but I'm immune to heat, so I'm okay. Thanks for asking though. Ida fell into step beside him. I was a bit concerned by Mr. Aizawa's approach to class, he said, chin in hand. But I trust the school's judgment. UA is the top program in the country. Even so, lying is downright immoral. Hey! You guys, wait up! Izuku turned to see Uraraka running towards them, hand waving in the air. You're the Infinity Girl, Ida observed as she approached. I'm Uraraka Ochiko, you're Ida Tenya and Midoriya Deku, right? Izuku recoiled. Deku? Yeah. That's what Bakugo called you during the fitness test, she continued. Izuku brightened a little. Oh, right. My name's actually Izuku, Kaken calls me Deku to make fun of me. It's another way of spelling my name which means useless. Ida blanched righteously. That's terrible. You're far from useless. Until a little while ago my quirk wasn't super useful for hero work, which is why he called me that. Izuku shrugged. I'm used to it at this point, I'm pretty sure it's a habit now anyway. I kinda like Deku, Uraraka mused. It's got an I can do it sort of vibe. Well, least to me it does. Still, it may be a habit for Kaken, but I'd rather no one else use it. UA's a new start for me, you know. Izuku reasoned. You got it, Uraraka said, giving him a thumbs up. I'll come up with my own nickname for you. How about Patch? She gestured towards the yellow streaks in his hair. Izuku laughed. I'd work on some other options, it's a little on the nose. Yeah, I figured, Uraraka said cheerfully. Guess I got my work cut out for me, huh birdie? Try again. Feathers? Izuku raised an eyebrow. Uraraka pouted. You've got feathers in your hair. It fits. I'm sorry, what? Izuku fished his phone out of his bag and opened the camera to get a look. True to her word, there were tiny yellow feathers interspersed throughout his green curls. Those were definitely not there this morning. He steepled his hands together and spoke solemnly. Uraraka, Ida, I believe I may be turning into a bird. Are we going to have a second Tokoyami in the class? Uraraka teased. Uraraka. Ida scolded. This is serious. He turned to Izuku. Do you need to see Recovery Girl? I can accompany you if you would like me to. If I wake up tomorrow covered in feathers, then I might just take you up on that offer, Ida. Izuku said. Can birds use phones? Uraraka wondered. Izuku laughed. Was this what having friends was like? The feathers seemed harmless, as far as Izuku could tell. He hadn't woken up covered in them like he'd feared, which was nice. He didn't particularly want to turn into a bird permanently. They did really hurt when he tried to pull one out, but that was to be expected given that they were quite literally attached to his scalp. It was a permanent addition, the little yellow tufts not going away when he switched from human to Pheonix and back again. Fun. The most annoying thing was that he couldn't tell whether they came from his quirk or one for all, or even a combination of the two. It was at times like this where Izuku almost regretted taking one for all. Almost. Thankfully, he was pretty sure that he had All Might's class that day, so he should be able to talk to him about it afterwards. Hopefully. He got dressed and ate breakfast like normal, only pausing when Inko stopped him on his way out to ask about the feathers. "They're a new development," Izuku said lightly. "I'm going to ask Mr. Yagi if he knows anything after class today." Inko moaned and fixed his tie. "As long as you're sure that they're safe." "They're just feathers," Izuku said, gently pushing her away and wrapping his scarf around his neck. "Okay honey," Inko said, brushing a kiss against his temple. "Have a good day at school, okay?" Izuku waved her off and set out for the UA campus. He had a feeling that today was going to be a good day. The day in question passed in a blur, and before he knew it All Might was entering the classroom and a solid half of his classmates were near rioting from the excitement. "I am here," the number one cried, coming through the door like a normal person. He was in fact coming through the door, but not like a normal person as he claimed. Rather, he was walking rather weirdly, lifting his knees in 90-degree angles and arms moving robotically. Izuku couldn't blame him, as far as he was aware this was the first class that the hero's teaching. Nervousness was understandable, even from All Might. All Might announced that they'd be doing a battle trial, and sent them to get changed and meet at Training Ground Beta. There was a flurry of movement as the whole class surged in an oddly synchronized movement to grab their costume cases, then scurry to the changing rooms. Izuku, not wanting to get his eyes poked out in the mania, waited for everyone else to grab theirs before moving to pick up his own, eyes and other squishy bits fully intact. His hero costume wasn't super fancy, though he had requested that everything be at the very least heat-resistant. First came the dark red bodysuit, fitted in a way that the stretchy fabric wouldn't impede his movement, and tight enough to be aerodynamic and not catch on anything. It was important that it wasn't loose because he was going to be throwing fire around, and while he may have been fireproof, he didn't want to risk that the material of his suit wasn't. The suit was high-collared, with a large cutout at his back to allow for the wings, even if he didn't use them that often. There was a golden stripe down each side, and a golden silhouette of a stylized flaming bird on his chest. Next he had a pair of black gloves, fingerless and long enough to reach his elbows. After the gloves came the bracers around his knees, shoulders and elbows, and a gold utility belt buckled around his waist. Finally were the snug black ankle boots, sturdy enough to protect his feet but light enough that they wouldn't weigh him down. He couldn't help but feel a little inadequate compared to some of the costumes around him. Was that Ida in the full suit of armor? "I like your costume, Midori," Uraraka said, waving him over. "Not too flashy, it's nice. I should have been a little more specific with mine, huh? This bodysuit is like, skin tight." "Thanks, I was feeling a little plain. If you don't like yours though you could go to the support course and ask for an update?" Izuku offered. "How's your mobility in it? Can you move okay?" "Now that you're ready, it's time for combat training," All Might announced. "Sir, this is the fake city from our entrance exam. Does that mean we'll be conducting urban battles again?" Ida spoke up, hand raised. Izuku briefly contemplated asking for his help with the design for his own costume, the other teen just looked so cool. "Not quite," All Might replied, "in fact we'll be moving you 2 steps ahead. Most of the villain fights you see on the news occur outside, but statistically speaking run-ins with the most dastardly evildoers take place indoors. Think about it. Backroom deals, home invasions, secret underground lairs, truly intelligent criminals stay hidden in the shadows. For this exercise you'll be split into heroes and villains, and fight 2-on-2 indoor battles. Isn't this a little advanced?" The girl with the frog quirk, Azui, he thought her name was, pointed out. "The best training is what you get on the battlefield." All Might boomed. "But remember, you can't just punch a robot this time, you'll be dealing with actual people now. Sir, will you be the one deciding who wins? How much can we hurt the other team? Do we need to worry about the losers getting expelled like earlier? Will you be splitting us up based on chance or comparative skill? Isn't my cape tray chic?" "I wasn't finished talking, listen up." All Might pulled out a little booklet. "The situation is this, villains have hidden a nuclear missile somewhere in their hideout, and the heroes must try to foil their plans. For the heroes to win, they either have to capture the villains or recover the weapon. For the villains to win, they must protect the weapon or capture the heroes." The setup was simple, kind of like a video game, Izuku mused. "Teams will be chosen by drawing lots," All Might announced, brandishing a box with the word lots on it. Never let it be said that All Might wasn't straightforward about things. Are you sure this is the best way to determine teams? Ida questioned. Pros often do have to team up with heroes from other agencies on the spot, so maybe he's preparing us for that? Izuku muttered. I see, Ida said, apparently having overheard. Life is a random series of events. Please excuse my rudeness. Izuku, thankfully, was not paired with Katsuki. Rather, he and Uraraka made up Team A, while Katsuki was paired with Ida in Team D. The first teams to fight shall be Team A as the heroes and Team D as the villains, All Might declared. Everyone else, head to the monitoring room to watch. Izuku took a deep breath. Okay. He was probably one of the best matchups against Katsuki, sure the force from the explosions was problematic, but he could steal the heat from them to power his own attacks. All Might was saying something to Ida and Katsuki as they were entering the building, but he couldn't hear the hero over the pounding of his own heart. There was a cool press against his arm, and he looked to see Uraraka there, hand on his bicep. Are you okay? She asked. You look a little panicked. Izuku nodded. Yeah, I'm okay. Uraraka gave him a thumbs up and handed over a copy of the building's floor plan. You think they want us to memorize this whole thing? It's so big. Izuku shrugged. I mean, probably not? It's probably best to get a decent grasp of the layout though. Uraraka made a soft noise in confirmation. That makes sense. So, Goldie, any plans? Goldie? I'm working on a nickname for you, they're not all going to be winners, she huffed. I feel like Greenie would fit better, Izuku mused, but I have a couple of ideas. Bakugo will probably come after me, which means if you can sneak around Ida you can secure the bomb. Why's he going to come after you? Izuku winced. We have a history. Plus, I haven't had the chance to give him an explanation for something and he's kinda angry about it. Anyways, Ida'll probably be guarding the bomb. Do you think you can fight him? He's fast, and I'm not great at fighting, Uraraka admitted. But if I can get him with my quirk I could float him so he can't run? That'll have to work. When Bakugo comes after me, I'll keep him busy so that you can run and find the bomb. Uraraka nodded. Sounds good to me. The 5 minutes are up. All Might's voice sounded out. Hero team is now entering the building. He really only has one volume, doesn't he? Uraraka joked. It didn't do a whole lot to lighten the mood, but he appreciated it nonetheless. Let's go. Like Izuku predicted, Katsuki came straight for him. He even had the audacity to try and pull off a sneak attack, which Izuku didn't know he had the self-control for. Good for him. Izuku had been keeping an eye out for his heat signature so it didn't work, but it had been worth a shot. Izuku tugged Uraraka out of the way of his attack and swept the heat from the other teen's crackling palms away from him. What's the matter, Deku? Kaken snapped, afraid to fight me? Quite the opposite, in fact, Izuku chirped. I believe since you weren't able to get the jump on me I get a free hit? Katsuki growled and lunged forward, fist swinging in a big right hook, as always. Izuku caught his arm and slammed him into the floor. Kaken, you're too predictable, Izuku chided. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Uraraka disappear around the corner. Good. You always start with a right hook, you really should switch things up from time to time. Katsuki lunged at him again, teeth bared and palms crackling. Now, Izuku probably shouldn't provoke him, the other boy was volatile enough as it was. However, the other boy tended towards larger explosions when he was angered, and the bigger the explosions that Katsuki leveled at him the more heat Izuku could throw back. Izuku ducked out of the way of another blast. I'm revoking your kneecap privileges. Katsuki scoffed. Izuku was forced to drop to the ground to avoid his fist. As if. He paused as if listening to something and Izuku took the opportunity to back up a few steps. Shut up and defend the weapon, glasses. I've got more important things to take care of. Izuku blocked the kick that Katsuki aimed at him and tried to loop the capture tape around his ankle. Katsuki, like the intellectual he was, ripped his leg away and threw a punch. His fist impacted into the wall, the explosion serving to both protect his knuckles and leave a sizable dent in the metal. Switching things up, I see. I'm glad you took my advice. Across the hall, the smoke from the explosion started to dissipate. This has been fun, but I must be off. Places to go, people to see, Izuku said, and with a cheerful wave bolted away down the corridor. With an angry roar, Katsuki took off after him. Deku, get back here you coward. He ducked around a corner, and leant against the wall to catch his breath. The plan was going great. As long as Kaken kept chasing him and Uraraka could take care of Ida, they'd be fine. Probably. Though, if he could take down Katsuki now he could join Uraraka for a 2-on-1 fight against Ida, which would exponentially help their chances of victory. Midori? Uraraka's voice sounded in his ear. Izuku tapped the comm, I'm here. How's it going? I found the bomb but Ida knows that I'm here, sorry. He's monologuing. Somehow that doesn't surprise me, Izuku muttered. Where are you? The middle of the 5th floor. You're right above me then. Izuku took a breath. Okay. We probably don't have much time left, so we've got to finish this fast. Deku. Izuku yelped and turned to see Katsuki standing at the end of the hall, like a creep. Why didn't he try another surprise attack? It probably would have worked too, given that Izuku was caught up with talking to Uraraka. Why aren't you using your fancy quirk, huh? You've been on the defensive this whole time, just stealing my explosions. Am I not worthy of your best? Am I not a threat to you? Oh, you're definitely a threat, Kaken, I'm not arguing with you on that, Izuku said lightly. I just figured that a bird probably wouldn't do a whole lot. Katsuki grinned, though it was more a baring of teeth than an expression of jubilance. How about you get over here and show me what you're really made of? Kaken, I'm flattered, but you're not my type. The smile got wider and more menacing. You don't take anything seriously, do you? Well, they say that laughter is the key to everything, Izuku smiled brightly. Katsuki tilted his head to one side. You know how my quirk works, don't you? Izuku tilted his own head the opposite direction, questioningly. I was there when it manifested, of course I do. Your sweat has nitroglycerin-like properties which allow you to make it explode. Well, imagine what I could do with a lot of it. Izuku swore his heart stopped for a second as the implications hit him. He nervously eyed the hand that Katsuki had leveled in his direction. These gauntlets aren't just for show. Well, I would hope not, they're incredibly tacky. They store up my sweat for one big blast, Kaken said, finger on the trigger both metaphorically and literally. Feel like taking me seriously now? There was a brief pause. Izuku assumed that someone was talking on Katsuki's comm. He'll be fine as long as he dodges. Katsuki snarled, and he pulled the trigger. The heat from the blast did nothing more than tickle, however the same could not be said for the force and Izuku went flying. Fire swirled around him but his mind was spinning too much for him to try and grab it. He slammed into the wall, impacting with a crack. There was a snap from somewhere within him and a familiar roar of flame. Everything went dark. The nerd's eyes widened comically as Katsuki pulled the trigger, and it was almost funny to see him go flying backwards. A second shockwave hit, sending Katsuki staggering back, and he couldn't help but grin. His gauntlets were even more powerful than he'd thought. Bakugu, answer me. What is going on down there? Did you cause that blast, DMN? He thought he muted his stick-in-the-mud teammate. When the smoke cleared, Deku was revealed, crumpled on the ground. You can stop pretending, you know. You've said it before, my explosions barely affect you. Get up and fight. Deku didn't move. Katsuki scoffed. What, too scared to face me now? He approached the other boy's prone form and prodded him with the toe of his boot. Get up. No response. Katsuki tried again. Deku. Still nothing. Katsuki's heart sank a little. Deku? An emotion that he wasn't familiar with was swimming in his chest. Izuku? He went to turn the other boy onto his side, but was forced to reel back. His skin was burning hot, too hot for Katsuki to touch for more than a second, even with his gloves. All Might's voice rang in his ears, but Katsuki couldn't hear it over the pounding of his heart. Bakugu, answer me. What is going on down there? Did you cause that blast? With Ida busy trying to communicate with Bakugu, Achiko ran for the bomb. Now was her chance. If she could get her hands on the weapon, that meant they would win. Ida saw her and lunged to intercept, but she'd already activated her quirk on herself and jumped into the air. All she needed was to get one hand on the bomb. She could manage the nausea. She deactivated her quirk with a shouted, "Release," but Ida was already running. He swept the bomb away and Achiko tumbled to the ground, head over heels. Ida started monologuing again, but Okeo paid his words no mind. It wasn't over, she wouldn't let Midoriya down. Speaking of, he'd been very quiet after telling her they'd have to finish this fast. She hoped that nothing bad had happened to him. All Might's voice sounded uncomfortably loud in her ear, and if she didn't know better she'd have thought he sounded panicked. Stop the match. Unlike most people he knew, consciousness did not come to Izuku all at once. Rather, it came in stages. First awareness, then feeling, then sound, then sight. When he finally opened his eyes, it was to Recovery Girl's pink visor hovering over him. Rise and shine, Sonny, she said cheerfully, though there was worry in her beady eyes. Izuku pushed himself into a sitting position. What happened? You were knocked unconscious during your heroics training, she said, sitting back on her chair. All Might may be the #1 hero, but his teaching skills need work. I mean, combat training for your first class? Don't insult All Might, Izuku said reflexively, blinking the dark spots out of his eyes. Now, the strange thing, Recovery Girl said, fixing him with a look, is that when you arrived you had no injuries to speak of. You were too hot to touch without being burned, but other than that you were perfectly healthy. If I was too hot to touch, then how'd I get here? Izuku asked. No one in my class that I know of has a quirk that makes them heat resistant. Recovery Girl hummed. I have it on good authority that they had to have Todoroki ice you to get you on the stretcher, though he had to do it continuously because you kept melting the ice. Haha, whoops. Ugh, he just said haha out loud. What had his life come to? Recovery Girl poked him, bringing him out of his introspective crisis. Has anything like this happened to you before? Izuku racked his brain. The only time I can think of is when I got attacked by a vil dash. His voice died in his throat as the implications hit him like a truck. He stared at his hands. They're shaking. He wasn't saved from the sludge villain, was he? He remembered hearing the roar of flame before blacking out, the slime ensconcing his body as his vision darkened. He'd assumed a hero with a fire quirk had saved him, but then why would someone have anonymously called the ambulance? No hero worth their license would just leave an unconscious kid on the ground. One hand lifted to cover his mouth. Izuku thought he might be sick. I think, he said slowly, that I died. I think I died when the sludge villain attacked me. He lifts his head to meet Recovery Girl's gaze. I think Kakin killed me. Recovery Girl's eyes narrowed. Your quirk is listed as a heat quirk, not a regeneration quirk. And regeneration quirks that can bring people back from the dead are unheard of. My quirk is Pheonix, Izuku corrected absently. If they can rise from the ashes, why can't I? His eyes drifted to the clock proclaiming it to be late afternoon. I should probably be getting home. Like you said, I'm in perfect health. He went to get up but Recovery Girl pushed him back down with surprising gentleness. If there's even the chance that you died and came back to life, I'm not letting you out of here without a thorough checkup, she snapped. At least an hour or so of prodding and poking passed before Recovery Girl was happy to let him go home. Well, maybe happy wasn't the right word. Content perhaps? Either way, when she begrudgingly let him loose the sky was painted in pink and gold by the low sun. He'd missed all his afternoon classes. Mr. Aizawa was probably going to choke him with his scarf. He was still reeling from his realization. He kind of hoped all his classmates had gone home, but he was well aware that it was a futile wish. Still, he wasn't sure that he was up to human interaction right now. He reached one's door and apprehensively slid it open. Hey, it's Midoriya. Izuku blinked as far too many sets of eyes turned to him. It's good to see you back. The speaker's spiky red hair bounced as he talked. Man, I don't know what you were saying in your match but you were all fired up, huh? Yeah. Figuratively and literally, Izuku murmured. Ha. I still can't believe you held your own against Bakugo, he's super strong. You did a great job dodging. You guys really turned it up in the first match, so none of us held back in our rounds either. It was far from elegant dash. Your dodging was like whoa. Izuku backed up 1, 2, 3 steps. He couldn't afford to be overwhelmed. Not here. Not now. Personal space, guys, please. The one with the spiky hair nodded. Sorry dude. I'm Kirishima Ijiru by the way. We've been going over training results while you were in recovery. Hi, I'm Shiro Hanta, the dark-haired teen with the big elbows added. More importantly, I'm Aoyama Yuga dash, the blonde sparkled. I'm Ashido Mina, the pink girl cut him off, and I've just gotta say, your dodging was awesome. Azui Tsuyu, a green-haired girl that he hadn't seen until that moment spoke up, but call me Tsu. Hey, the big boy at the back greeted. Satu. It's nice to properly meet you, Izuku said. We wanted to come by and see you while you were in recovery, but Recovery Girl wouldn't let us in, Kirishima admitted, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. I was kind of unconscious, so it was probably for the best, Izuku reasoned. Kirishima nodded, grinning. His teeth looked very sharp. Like I said, it's good to see that you're up and moving. Tokoyami. Izuku looked over to see Ida advancing on the boy with the bird head. Stop using that desk as a chair. Get off of it this instant. Dude, you need to chill, the girl with the earphone jack earlobe said. The boy with the tail raised an eyebrow. You're carrying a lot of tension. Izuku excused himself from the group clustered around him and made his way over. Tokoyami and the girl looked like they weren't much for unnecessary conversation. It do be like that sometimes, he said in lieu of introduction, dropping to sit cross-legged on the floor beside them. Ida looked close to tears. We have chairs for a reason. Hey, Midoriya. Izuku turned to see Uraraka running towards him, arms laden with books. Are you okay? Yeah, just a little overwhelmed, Izuku said. It is very loud in here and I have a bit of a headache. He actually was starting to get a headache, so it technically wasn't a lie. His gaze landed on Katsuki's empty desk. Where'd Bakugo go? We tried to stop him from leaving, but he wouldn't listen, Uraraka said. You just missed him. Izuku sighed. Thanks Uraraka. I'll talk to him later, I'm not sure I can face him right now. Is this because of what happened in the battle training? Izuku's fists clenched. Something like that. He got up off of the floor and made his way over to his desk. When he went to put on his gloves, he absently noted that his fingernails had cut little red crescents into his palms. He hadn't even noticed. His scarf was a comforting weight around his shoulders and neck, and it was soft as he buried his chin into it. Hot tears pricked at the corners of his eyes, and he furiously blinked them away. He wouldn't cry now. Not here. It wasn't until later when he was at home in bed that he finally let the tears fall. Izuku was a crybaby, always had been, always will be. He'd been stopping himself from crying since that realization had hit him, and the tears had been bottling up in a way that he couldn't help but compare to the heat energy he stored. And the resulting waterworks were equally as powerful. Who knows how much time passed for him just flat out sobbing, doubtlessly leaving tear stains on his limited edition all-night pillowcases. He sniffled, grabbing yet another tissue to dab at his eyes. He knew for a fact that if he looked in the mirror, his eyes would be as red as Kaken's. That though alone was enough to send him spiraling into tears again. Kaken killed him. Kaken killed him. Sure, he probably didn't mean to, but still. That didn't change what had transpired. No, he pulled himself together a little bit, I have no proof that I actually died. It's a possibility, yes, but I don't have any proof. He started crying. Again. He was a terrible person. Who blamed someone else for something that they didn't have any proof for? Him, apparently. His mother had always joked that they both had minor secondary quirks that made their tear ducts never run dry. It wasn't true, Izuku found out, as his gasping sobs slowed. He'd run out of tears to cry. Okay, he thought, okay. Let's not worry about this right now. I'll talk to Kaken once I actually know what happened. There's no point in jumping the gun and making us both feel bad. He fumbled for his phone to check the time. 2 in the morning. Why was he like this? Bundling his blankets tight around him, he buried his face in one of the few dry spots on his pillows. Izuku eventually drifted off into an uneasy slumber, though his sleep was anything but restful, his dreams plagued with fiery blasts and burning crimson eyes. Izuku Deku was avoiding him. He was surprisingly successful in his endeavors, despite the fact that Katsuki sat right in front of him, scurrying away like a scared little mouse as soon as the lunch bell rang before Katsuki could so much as think about talking to him. And the reporters out the front of the school gates didn't help his sour mood. The audacity of some people, throwing the sludge villain incident back in his face. Homeroom class was boring. Mr. Eyebags told them to pick a class representative and took a nap at his desk while the blue-haired boy with glasses and a stick up his butt declared that they would hold an election. Katsuki wasn't so prideful as to not be able to admit, albeit begrudgingly, that it wasn't a bad plan, though Deku took it a step further. How about we make a rule that you can't vote for yourself, he proposed. A good half of the class groaned at that, but agreed. Katsuki snatched his slip of paper from the glasses kid, did he seriously have them already prepared, and stared at it. He'd never considered voting for someone other than himself. It did take the choice out of his hands, given that Deku was the only one in this DMN class that he actually knew the name of. He dutifully wrote down the nerd's name and handed the paper in. Votes counted, Mr. Eyebags chalked the scores up on the board. It wasn't very surprising to see Deku's name in first with 5 votes. The nerd had a bad habit of befriending everyone he came across. In second was the girl with a spiky ponytail, with 4 votes to her name. Glasses looked like he was holding back tears. They were let out for lunch and Deku disappeared into the throng of people before Katsuki could grab him. Did he have to make everything so difficult? An arm was slung over his shoulder, and he shrugged it off. Bakugu, you should come sit with us. Katsuki eyed the speaker's spiky red hair. No. Spiky hair honest to God pouted. You sure, man? Come on Kirishima, someone called, and spiky hair was pulled away. Katsuki huffed. He wasn't here to make friends. He could see Deku's dumb 2-colored hair from across the cafeteria, and he fought down the urge to storm over and demand answers. Instead, he made his way to Deku's table, intent on looming until someone noticed him. Some greater power was determined to thwart all his plans, however, as before he so much as reached the halfway point an alarm blared and the area descended into chaos. Almost immediately he was thrown into the crowd of panicking students, drowning in a sea of teenage bodies who seriously needed to invest in deodorant. Again, ugh. The horde calmed down after Glasses catapulted himself atop the exit door and yelled at them. Katsuki hated to admit it, but he had some serious pipes. This day was just getting better and better. Note the sarcasm. Deku stepped down as class representative and handed his position over to Glasses. Not very surprising, in all honesty. It was like all these extras didn't know him at all. Then finally, Katsuki was able to corner the nerd as he was leaving the school grounds. Deku. The other boy jumped a solid foot into the air and stammered out a greeting. Hey Kaken. You've been avoiding me. He was never one to beat around the bush. I was hoping you hadn't noticed. Katsuki raised an eyebrow. You followed me around for years, of course I noticed when you stopped. Why have you been avoiding me? I needed to work through some stuff, Deku offered sheepishly. Katsuki narrowed his eyes. If this is about the combat exercise, I didn't mean to hurt you that badly. You know, most people would apologize for exploding someone into a wall, Deku snapped. 'Twould appear that the nerd had finally found his claws. Maybe if you hadn't been avoiding me I would have been able to say sorry to you. Would you? Yes. Deku folded his arms. Do it then. Katsuki scowled. I dash. Deku tilted his head to one side, a little mockingly. Too hard for you? I'm sorry, okay? Katsuki spat. I didn't know it would be that powerful, and I didn't think it would affect you that badly. Deku hummed. I accept your apology, forced as it may be. I'm trying, okay? Deku's cool gaze softened. I know you are, and I'm proud of you. He turned away, towards the way home. Walk with me? I believe I owe you an explanation. And I apparently owe you my kneecaps. Deku's eyes brightened. You remembered. Katsuki scoffed. You yelled that you were revoking my kneecap privileges in the middle of our fight, that kind of thing sticks with you. Ah? Deku trailed off, looking away. Anyway, Kaken, it is time we talked. There's a lot I should probably tell you about. They walked in slightly awkward silence for a solid 5 minutes before Deku spoke up again. Remember the sludge villain? Of course I do, the fucker attacked me, Katsuki scowled. And you remember how I said he nearly killed me? Yeah. Where are you going with this? Deku took a deep breath. Well, my quirk mutated when he attacked me. I went to a quirk specialist who helped me figure out what it had mutated into. And that's why you're a bird now, Katsuki interpreted. Deku looked upwards. I can manipulate and absorb heat energy, as well as some other stuff. And that other stuff is? Deku shrugged. Well, you've seen the bird thing. I can't create heat energy when I'm human, but I can make fire when I'm in my Pheonix form. I can also manifest wings and claws from the Pheonix if I have enough heat energy stored up, but they burn through my reserves pretty quickly. Why didn't you take the heat from my explosion when I hit you with the gauntlet? Katsuki asked. It wouldn't have done anything, the nerd said tiredly. The force is what messed me up, not the heat. I'm sorry. You didn't know, Deku said. There's some other quirk stuff I've been trying to figure out, too. I worked out that I can turn heat energy into kinetic energy and use it to augment my arms and legs, but it kind of, he trailed off, mumbling. It kind of what? The nerd muttered something under his breath. What does it do, Deku? Deku winced. It breaks my bones? Katsuki pinched the bridge of his nose. Why would you even? Deku elbowed him in the side. I'm still working it out. Is that why you needed my kneecaps? I only used it once. Deku protested. It's still in the trialing phase. You can't have my bones, Deku, Katsuki elbowed him back. Especially if you keep breaking your own. Go steal your nerd friend's bones. Deku looked away. He laced his fingers together, seemingly contemplating saying something. What are you thinking, Deku? Spit it out. Call me by my actual name and I'll think about it, Deku shot back. Finally grew a spine, I see, Katsuki muttered. A cheeky smile turned Deku's lips upwards. I bet you don't actually know my name, do you? I know your name. Katsuki snapped. Deku crossed his arms. Prove it then. Call me by my name for the next week, and I'll tell you. Katsuki scowled. Fine. But you better actually tell me, rather than putting it off for months like you did before. Deku Izuku held out his hand. Deal? Katsuki shook it. Deal. Izuku had a week to figure out what was going on and decide whether or not to tell Kaken about the whole potentially killing him thing. Possibly more than a week, if the other boy slipped up and called him Deku instead of his actual name. Either way, he had time. Which is why he should be paying attention in class, rather than worrying about things that weren't happening in that very moment. Today's training will be a little different, Aizawa announced, and Izuku snapped to attention. All Might, another faculty member, and I will be supervising you. 3 pros, huh? Perhaps it was because of the break-in? Even if it wasn't, this ought to be good. Sir, what kind of training is this? Aizawa held up a card with Rescue written on it in blocky blue letters. Rescue. It seemed a little redundant given the information on the card, but Aizawa was the teacher here. You'll be dealing with natural disasters, shipwrecks, stuff like that. The class clamored with excitement, and Izuku wasn't afraid to admit that he was among them. I wasn't finished yet, Izawa cut in. What you wear in this exercise is up to you. I know that you're excited about your costumes, but keep in mind that you aren't used to them yet and they might limit your abilities. This training is going to be at an off-campus facility, so we'll be taking a bus to get there. That's all, start getting ready. Izuku didn't particularly fancy the idea of going around shirtless if he had to bust out the wings, so it looked like he'd be wearing his costume. Out by the bus, Ida wasted no time in shouting them all into line. Gather around Class 1A. Using your student numbers form 2 orderly lines so we can load the bus efficiently. Where had he gotten that whistle? Did he just carry one around with him? Turns out that the bus's open layout ruined Ida's boarding strategy, but it was fun while it lasted. You really need to chill, Ashido said cheerfully. If we're pointing out the obvious, then there's something I want to ask, about you Midoriya, Azui said. Izuku twisted to look at her. Yeah? What were you planning on doing when you threw the softball in our quirk assessment test? Mr. Izawa said you were going to break your bones, is that true? Izuku winced. One thing I can do with my quirk is turn heat energy into kinetic energy and use it to augment my limbs. It's a new thing I figured out, but it kind of breaks my bones when I use it. It breaks your bones? Ashido asked incredulously. Shatters Izuku confirmed. I used it once in the entrance exam and it basically turned all the bones in my arm into confetti. I'm trying not to use it until I figure out how to rein it in. Your quirk is super cool, Kirishima said from beside Azui. And it's flashy too. My hardening works to take down bad guys and is pretty strong, but it doesn't look all that impressive. No way, I think it's awesome looking. Izuku cried. The nerve of this guy. Talking bad about himself with a cool quirk like that? Inconceivable. Definitely pro-material. You really think so? Izuku nodded furiously. Kirishima laughed. Ah, thanks bro. It does seem like it'd be easier to be a popular hero with something flashier though. My naval laser has the perfect combination of panache and strength, Aoyama sparkled. It's kinda lame if it gives you a stomachache every time you use it, Ashido said, a pink hand on his shoulder. Aoyama slumped like a puppet with its strings cut. Well, if any of our classmates have pro-worthy quirks it's definitely Todoroki and Bakugu. Kirishima said, pointing a thumb at the two in question. Sure, but Bakugu's so angry all the time, Azui reasoned. So he'll probably never be that popular. What did you say? Katsuki roared. Everyone sitting around him shrank away a little. I'll kick your butt. I mean, we basically just met. Kaminari spoke up, grinning, but we can tell that your personality to everyone but Midoriya is flaming crap mixed with sewage. You're going to regret the day you applied to UA. Kaken seethed. Can't kick his butt if you don't have any bones, Izuku cut in. Katsuki scowled. I told you already, you can't have my DMN bones D, Izuku. Ashido's eyebrows raised. First name basis, huh? We've known each other since we were kids, Izuku said lightly. Besides, we have a deal. He has to call me by my actual name for a week to prove that he knows it. We're here, stop messing around, Izawa interrupted. The group filed obediently out of the bus, and there before them was a truly gargantuan dome with a pro in a puffy spacesuit standing in front of it. It's the space hero, 13. Uraraka gushed. They're one of my favorite heroes. Hey everyone, 13 greeted. I've been waiting for you, and I can't wait to show you what's inside. They gestured towards the entrance, and Izuku was one of the first to hurry inside. How did UA have the budget for these things? The dome seemed even bigger from the inside, with 6 different disaster zones around the central plaza, 7 if you counted the entrance. It was almost like an amusement park, given its scale. Some of his classmates seemed to share that sentiment, if their excited clamoring was anything to judge by. I created this training facility to prepare you for different types of disasters, wildfires, earthquakes, shipwrecks, etc. I call it the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or the USJ for short. Just like Universal Studios Japan. Izuku briefly wondered if that was a purposeful move. It wouldn't surprise him. Shouldn't All Might be here already? Izawa asked. He did too much hero work this morning, 13 replied quietly, and held up 3 fingers. He's resting in the teacher's lounge. That man is the height of irresponsibility, Izawa griped, and Izuku fought down the urge to defend him. Izawa turned back to the class. All right, clock's ticking. We should get started. Excellent. 13 said. But before we begin, I'd like to say one thing. Well, 2 things, maybe 3. Numbers aside, listen carefully. You're probably all aware of my quirk, Black Hole. I can use it to SCK up anything and turn it to dust. Beside Izuku, Uraraka was nodding furiously. You've used Black Hole to save people from all kinds of disasters before. That's true, but my quirk could also very easily be used to kill. Silence fell over the group as 13 continued. Some of you also have powers that can be dangerous. Izuku's mind flashed back to the research he'd done and he shuddered. In our superhuman society all quirks are certified and stringently regulated, so we often overlook how dangerous they can be. Please don't forget that if you lose focus or make the wrong move your powers can be deadly, even if you are trying to do something virtuous like rescuing someone. Thanks to Aizawa's fitness tests you have a solid idea of your quirk's potential, and because of All Might's combat training you likely experienced how dangerous your powers can be when used against other people. Carry those lessons over to this class. 13 spread their arms. Today, you're going to learn how to use your quirk to save people's lives. You won't be using your powers to attack enemies or each other, only to help. After all, that's what being a hero is all about. Ensuring the safety of others. 13 bowed. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening. The class hooped and cheered. Right, Aizawa said, cutting them all off, now that's over. There was a crackling noise as the lights around the dome fizzled off. The fountain at the center of the plaza sputtered and as a swirling void opened up in front of the fountain. There was no way this was good. Stay together and don't move, Aizawa barked. 13, protect the students. There were people emerging from the space-like void now, a person with what was frankly far too many hands, the first one out. Has the training started already? Kirishima asked, one hand shading his brow. I thought we were rescuing people. Stay back. Izuku's heart sank in his chest as Aizawa pulled his yellow goggles over his eyes. This is real, their teacher snapped, and those are villains. His worst suspicions confirmed, Izuku's fists clenched by his sides. This was bad. This was very bad. Aizawa's capture scarf snapped into the air around him. How did so many real villains get into a secure UA facility? While Izuku was equally as curious as Kirishima about the answer to that question, perhaps more so, he was a little more concerned about how they were going to get out. Yaoyorozu stepped forward. 13, why aren't the alarms going off? Good question, I'm not sure. A cool shiver of fear went down Izuku's spine. Is the entire campus under attack, or is this their only target? If the alarm senses aren't being triggered then one of these villains must have a quirk that's masking their presence here. Astute observation, but still not going to get them out. They carefully chose this isolated facility as an entry point at a time when a class was being taught, Todoroki continued, oblivious to Izuku's inner panic. They're fools for trespassing here, but they've thought this out. Whatever their plan, they must have a concrete objective in mind. But what is it? 13, get them out of here, Aizawa ordered. And alert the main campus. Actually, if they've got the ability to block our sensors then they may be jamming our regular communications too. Kaminari dash. The boy in question snapped to attention. Try using your quirk to contact the school. Yes sir. What are you doing to do? Izuku asked desperately. You can't fight them on your own, there's too many of them. Even if you can nullify their quirks, your fighting style isn't suited to large groups, your power's best for ambushes and one-on-one confrontations. You can't be a pro if you only have one trick, Aizawa said. I'll leave it to you 13. And then he was off, jumping down the stairs with his capture weapon flaring behind him. Izuku watched, heart in his mouth, as Aizawa efficiently took down a number of thugs at the front. I guess I really shouldn't have underestimated him, Izuku muttered. This is no time to be analyzing. Ida yelled. Let's go. Izuku was quick to follow him out, but they were stopped in their tracks by a surprise reappearance of the smoky void, opening up between the group and the exit. There is no escape for you, the abyss rumbled, surging up to solidify into something close to a wall with glowing yellow eyes. It's a pleasure to meet you, we are the League of Villains. I know it's impolite, but we decided to invite ourselves in and say hello. And besides, the eyes, if you could even call them that, narrowed, what place would be more fitting for the symbol of peace to take his final breath? Izuku blanched. I believe he was supposed to be here today and yet I see no sign of him, the Mistman continued. There must have been a change in plan that we did not foresee. Ah well, in the end I suppose it doesn't matter. The smoky substance that seemed to make this man up spread wider. I still have a role to play. With a wordless roar Katsuki lunged forward, heat crackling in his palms and Kirishima hot on his heels. 13, in the midst of uncapping one of their fingers, recoiled. Did you think we were going to stand around and let you tear this place to shreds? The gray smoke curling around them all made it impossible to see who was speaking, but it sounded like Kirishima. You live up to your school's reputation, but you should be more careful, children. The gray smog cleared, and Izuku could see the mist villain's smoke-like body reforming. Someone might get hurt. You two, get out of the way right now. 13 called. Mist villain did not seem to be happy about this, his body expanding out to surround them. I'll scatter you across this facility to meet my comrades and your deaths. Izuku was consumed by the rushing void, until the ground under his feet gave way and he was falling. Plummeting from high heights was never fun, especially when one was plummeting towards water. A little-known fact about Izuku: he hated water. He hated it with a passion. He hated it even more so when he plunged into those clear blue depths. The first thing to hit him was the cold, one of the main reasons he hated water. The second thing to hit him was that there was a villain with a shark-like head swimming right for him. He also had far too many sharp teeth. Then Azui was there, kicking the villain to one side and pulling him to safety. She dropped him up onto the ship and jumped up after him, dumping Mineta on the floor none too gently. Azui, he shivered. You saved my life. I told you to call me Tsu, she scolded. Too cold and miserable to even think about arguing, Izuku just nodded numbly. She sighed. This is turning out to be a terrible day of class. You said it. I keep thinking about what that villain said though. They knew our schedule, that we were going to be here. They must have stolen the files while we were all stuck in the cafeteria. Izuku shuddered. The teachers were all preoccupied with the press, which means that they've been waiting for the perfect time to attack. He was surprised that he managed to get that all out with minimal stuttering. His teeth were chattering something fierce. His throat warmed with stored energy, and he breathed out just enough to wrap around him and dry his clothes. The limit to the amount of energy he could store had increased tremendously when he received One for All, so the dent it made in his reserves was pretty small. The idea of wasting power didn't sit right with him, but he'd be useless if he was too cold to move. Still though, he hadn't expected to have to fight villains today, so his reserves were only about half full. Hold on a second. It's not like these guys could really kill All Might, Mineta protested. He'll show up and pound them until there's nothing left. Think about it though, if they spent so much time planning out this attack then they probably figured out a way to kill him, Azui, Tsu pointed out. Izuku winced. She had a point, little as he wanted to admit it. And didn't you hear what that smoke guy said? She continued, maybe we should worry more about not getting tortured to death, otherwise we might not survive long enough to see All Might again. I'm inclined to agree with you, Azui, Tsu, Izuku amended at her sharp look. I would rather not die here. Even if he does show up, Tsu said, who knows if he'll make it out in one piece. Izuku glanced over at Mineta, who looked maybe 3 seconds away from either fainting or wetting his pants. No way. The pros are going to save us, right? You heard what 13 and Aizawa said, the villains are blocking our communications, Izuku reasoned. The pros probably don't even know that anything's wrong. That's not helping. Mineta screeched, then shrieked again when he saw the villains surrounding the boat. Bad guys. We're all going to die. Mineta wailed. I didn't even get a girlfriend yet. Izuku resisted the urge to smack him. That was not a priority right now. Actually, wait a moment. It doesn't make sense for them to send you here, as, Tsu, Izuku muttered. You're in your element here, so to speak. Sure, I'm not much use here, but still. Makes me think that they probably don't know what our quirks are. You have a point, if they'd known I was a frog they would have sent me to the fire zone, Tsu said. They probably separated us because they don't know what we can do, and then plan to overpower us while we were in smaller groups. I mean he looked over the side of the boat to the villains in the water, they have us beat in sheer numbers. They'll pick us off one by one. He took a deep breath. Okay. We can use that to our advantage. They don't know what our quirks are, so for all they know the 3 of us could be super powerful. Look, none of them are trying to climb into the boat, they're unsure. Though that does mean that they won't underestimate us. Their guards are up, they're playing it smart and being cautious. For now at least, anyways. We need a plan, he said finally, turning to Tsu. Your quirk is frog, what can you do with it? I can jump really far and I'm a naturally adept swimmer, and I can stretch my tongue out really far, she answered. It's prehensile, right? Tsu nodded. I can also regurgitate my stomach, though I don't see how that would be useful in this situation. Oh, and I secrete a toxic mucus but it's not super strong, it just stings a little. Okay. He could work with that. My quirk, as you've seen, is called Pheonix. I still don't know everything I can do with it, but I'm immune to heat and can manipulate and store it as well. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck self-consciously. I can also turn into a phoenix, which allows me to fly and make fire. I can't create heat or fire when I'm human, though if I have enough stored I can breathe it out in a concentrated blast, or manifest the wings from my phoenix form. And like I said on the bus, I can turn heat energy into kinetic and use it to augment my limbs but it breaks my bones in the process. Mineta gaped at him. Tsu just nodded. I've just got these sticky ball on my head, Mineta said, pulling one off and sticking it to the boat. Their strength varies depending on how I'm feeling, and they grow back as fast as I can pull them off. I bleed if I use too many though, and they don't stick to me. Any further planning was interrupted by an enormous watery hand crushing a hole into the middle of the boat, essentially snapping it in two. Mineta, predictably, freaked out and started throwing purple ball at the villains. Izuku briefly wondered what his motives for being a hero were if he got this freaked out at an attack. Did he think he was going to be able to wait for a different hero to show up and save him if he made it to pro status? Don't freak out. Izuku snapped. They'll guess your quirk. He watched as the same shark-like villain who'd gone after him earlier shoot away the ball without touching them. Ha! The boat shuddered under his feet, and Mineta started wailing again. Tsu, ever the brave soul unafraid to speak what everyone was thinking, eyed him drolly. So Mineta, are you really sure the hero thing is right for you? Shut up! Mineta shrieked. It's weirder not to be scared right now. We only got out of junior high a little while ago. I didn't think I'd be facing death a few days after starting UA. You can panic later. For now we have to come up with something, and fast. Izuku clapped his hands together decisively. If I transform and draw their attention away from the boat, do you think you can jump far enough away from them to get out of their range? Tsu tilted her head to one side. I'm not sure. The quick sinking of the boat didn't exactly lend itself to calm and composed plan-making. Nonetheless, he had to come up with something or they were definitely all going to die. Okay, new plan. Tsu, you grab Mineta and jump as far as you can. Mineta, throw as many of your ball down into the water as you can. I'll transform and blast them with fire to keep them off your tail, and hopefully crowd them into sticking to the ball and each other. Well, we don't exactly have time to deliberate, Tsu said dryly. It was a very astute observation, the boat was indeed sinking. Izuku estimated maybe 20 seconds before they'd be submerged, which he wasn't looking forward to. At all. All right, time to go. Izuku picked Mineta up and shoved him into Tsu's grasp, and leapt into the air. He screeched as loudly and as viciously as he could, and the villains in the water snapped to attention. He looped around just out of reach of their attacks and sent a concentrated blast of fire downward. It wasn't aimed directly at the villains, just close enough that the heat would hurt but not enough to burn them too badly. Izuku may have wanted to live, but he wasn't a villain. He didn't want to scar them permanently. The plan worked surprisingly well. The villains that weren't quickly stuck together were herded into the others via red-hot flames, and the few who managed to escape were surprisingly easy for the hero students to take down, even with the villains having an advantage in the water. It was like they hadn't trained at all. Maybe they hadn't? Tsu and Mineta stuck the last few villains together and made their way to the edge of the lake. Izuku flew down to perch on her shoulder. Sue him, he didn't want to get wet. If we follow the shore to the exit we can avoid the main plaza, Tsu pointed out. And that way we won't run into the villains that Mr. Aizawa's fighting. Izuku chirped in agreement. He was concerned about Aizawa though. Their teacher's fighting style was suited for ambushes and one-on-one battles. How long could he hold out in a big group like that? Why haven't you turned back yet? Neither of us can understand you, Mineta complained. Izuku pushed off of Tsu's shoulder and landed on the shore, transforming back to crouch down on the dry land. I can't swim, Izuku said briefly. Also, I'm worried about Mr. Aizawa. If he doesn't get any backup then he's just going to overexert himself. He'll end up defeated by those villains because he was trying to protect us. Wait, don't tell me you're suggesting, are you trying to get us killed? Mineta protested. I'm not suggesting that we jump straight into the middle of the battle, Izuku defended, but maybe we could take out some of those guys out to lighten his load? Snipe off some of the villains at the edges of the fight? Tsu agreed, Mineta as well, albeit reluctantly. Could we maybe make a detour to the fire zone first? Izuku asked sheepishly. There are probably classmates of ours there, and if I'm going to be of much use I'll need to stock up on heat. Tsu nodded, and Mineta heaved a sigh of relief. As long as we're not going to the central plaza right away. Izuku transformed back and flew alongside them as they stealthily made their way over to the side of the lake nearest to the conflagration zone. Once they were in the shallows, Izuku turned human again and dropped lightly onto the shore. The entrance should be pretty close, Izuku said. Tsu, do you want to wait here? I know the fire'll dry you out. I'm staying here too. Mineta yelped. There'll be villains in there. Izuku gave him a look. Are you sure that heroism is the path for you? No, it doesn't matter. You guys can try and sneak to the exit if you want to, I'm going to see if I can help whoever's in here. Tsu patted him on the shoulder. Good luck. Izuku grinned nervously. Let's hope I don't need it, but thanks. He crept around to where he thought the entrance was, and slipped inside. The fires roaring around him radiated a comforting warmth and he was immediately far more relaxed than he should have been, considering the fact that they were under attack by villains. Still, this was his territory. Izuku reached out and took hold of the flames around him, sweeping the energy towards him. His throat warmed. Izuku transformed and leapt into the air. He didn't need to waste time on fighting villains, and he didn't want to risk that the villains in question had heat resistance or immunity either. He swept over the area, his red-orange feathers and the flames flickering over them a very effective camouflage. His sharp eyes picked out a blur of white amongst the flames, and he banked towards it. The blur in question turned out to be Ajiru, who'd seemingly been employing a hit-and-run tactic to avoid being brutally murdered. Izuku landed beside him and turned back. "Where have you been this whole time?" Ajiru yelped. "Flood zone," Izuku answered. "Have you been here by yourself?" "Yeah," Ajiru said. Izuku nodded. "Okay, we're getting out of here. The exit's pretty close by." "You sure are confident," Ajiru observed. "Yeah, well, I'm good with fire," Izuku said. "Do you want me to draw the villains away while you get to the exit? Will you be okay?" Ajiru asked, concerned. "I'm a bird, and I'm pretty good at dodging, so I should be fine," Izuku affirmed. He pointedly didn't mention the fact that he was pretty sure he couldn't permanently die either. "Let's go." Like before, the plan went off without a hitch. Izuku was a little worried, in all honesty. Two plans going this well made him concerned that something was going to go terribly wrong very soon. This much good luck couldn't possibly last. The duo found their way back to the edge of the flood zone, where Tsu and Mineta were waiting. "Were you there by yourself?" Mineta asked. Ajiru nodded. Mineta shuddered. "That sounds awful. I'm glad I wasn't alone." "Way to be sensitive, Mineta," Tsu said, a little scathingly. "We're going to the central plaza to see if Mr. Aizawa needs any help," Izuku said to Ajiru. "You want to come with us?" Ajiru blinked a few times, before shrugging. "You know what, sure. Why not?" The trio swam stealthily around to the edge of the lake bordering the central plaza, with Izuku flying low alongside them. When they reached the shore, Izuku turned human and begrudgingly dropped into the water beside Tsu. Immediately he was beset by the cold, but until he got out of the water there was no point in wasting his reserves to heat himself up. He could manage the chill. He would have to manage the chill, he corrected, as he watched in shock as the villain with all the hands set his own on Aizawa's elbow. First the fabric turned gray and flaked away, and then their teacher's very skin followed suit. Still, even with a heavily injured elbow, Aizawa was still a force to be reckoned with, ducking out of the way of incoming attacks and dishing out his own with a vengeance. It wasn't until the enormous beaked villain with the exposed brain stepped into the fray that things really started going downhill. The villain grabbed Aizawa and smashed him into the ground, repeatedly. Izuku felt like he might throw up. He watched, immobilized by the horrific sight as the villain snapped Aizawa's arm like a twig. The warp villain from before materialized beside the pale-haired man with all the hands, saying something to him. Handman spoke again, but Izuku was too fixated on the blood pooling around their teacher's prone form to take note of his words. He kind of wished he had when the villain moved swiftly towards them, hand reaching out towards Tsu's face. Izuku flashed back to when he'd grabbed Aizawa's elbow, the way the fabric and skin had fallen away like ashes, and with the image of him doing the same to Tsu floating in his brain, Izuku threw himself between them. The villain's fingers poked into his face. Izuku held his breath, daring to peek one eye open. "You really are so cool, Eraserhead," the villain mused. The beaked villain smashed Aizawa into the ground again, and Izuku smacked the villain's hand out of his face before those deadly fingers could take effect, and breathed fire right into his face. The hand mask he was wearing stopped him from getting burnt, but the heat from the blast served to send him stumbling back. "You brat," he screeched. "Nomu! Get him!" The monstrous beaked villain moved with a speed Izuku wouldn't have thought a creature its size capable of and was bearing down on him within seconds. This was not good. Its hand clamped with a vice grip around his arm. Izuku could feel his bones creaking under the pressure. As its other hand rose, probably to crush his skull, Tsu's tongue wrapped around him and yanked him out of its grip, which surprised him. Had it loosened? Its grip? How had she been able to pull him out? How strong was Tsu's tongue? A resounding boom echoed through the facility, and all heads turned to the cloud of smoke obscuring the exit. All Might himself strode out from the smog. Even at this distance Izuku could see that he wasn't smiling. "We're saved!" Mineta cried. Even though All Might was here, Izuku wasn't so sure that was true. From what he'd seen, the beaked villain might be as strong as All Might, and it had the decay and warp villains backing it up. Also, though the others may not have known, Izuku knew that All Might had already used up his time for the day. He had to be running on fumes by now. Izuku's heart sank in his chest. This wasn't good. This wasn't good at all. All Might's clash with Nomu was truly something to behold. It was like watching a train crash in slow motion. You wanted to look away, but you couldn't, no matter how horrific it was. He'd gotten all 4 students plus Aizawa out of the way and commanded them to head back to the exit before throwing himself into the fight. With Aizawa's form lolling between Izuku and Ajiru, they were able to support him fully as they started to head back to the exit. Izuku couldn't help but glance back. Nomu was taking All Might's punches like they were nothing more than a light breeze. The hand villain, Shigaraki, Izuku thought the warp villain had called him, was gloating about Nomu's quirk, shock absorption. No wonder Nomu didn't seem to feel anything. All Might attempted a suplex on the beast, creating an enormous cloud of dust around them. Did you see that? That suplex was like an explosion. Mineta cheered. All that power, and he still has to check his notes while teaching, Tsu said dryly. All Might was powerful, yes, but Izuku knew that he only had the dregs of that power left today. And even so, it wasn't like they could do a whole lot to help. Potentially getting caught and used as a hostage was worse than not helping at all. Izuku risked another glance over his shoulder. Oh no. The smoke had cleared, revealing the Nomu half in, half out of a portal. Its legs were in the air where its torso was being suplexed, but its head and arms were emerging from the ground under All Might, clawed hands digging into the hero's sides. Blood started to blossom out from around Nomu's fingers, staining the white shirt red. Wait. Izuku flashed back to the time Mr. Yagi showed him the horrific scar on his side. Those claws were digging into All Might's weak spot. This was very bad. And now All Might was sinking into the portal. This was even worse than Izuku first thought. He didn't know if the warp villain could close the portals while something was still in them, but that wasn't something he was willing to risk. Azui, can you please help Ajiru carry Mr. Aizawa? Sure, she agreed, slipping into his spot supporting their teacher. But what are you going to do? And Izuku was moving, wings snapping out behind him as he raced towards the villains. It would burn through his reserves, but thanks to his detour to the fire zone he was as full as he could get without being in danger of exploding. When the warp villain opened up before him, he was going too fast to stop or avoid it. It was only thanks to Kaken coming out of nowhere and blasting the villain into the ground that stopped him from being warped to who knows where. Get out of the way! Ha! Kaken? Where did you come from? From his position in the air, Izuku spotted the ice creeping across the ground, covering the Nomu and immobilizing it. Todoroki. Were he and Kaken working together? The ice stopped just before it reached All Might, and the hero took the opportunity to weaken Nomu's fingers and rip out of its grip. He leapt back, but he was definitely favoring his bad side. And then Kirishima showed up, leaping in to throw a punch at Shigaraki with a roar. It didn't land, the roar kind of gave him away, but it would have been cool if it did. He moved back out of Shigaraki's range, scowling. DMN, that would have been cool. With the Nomu encased in ice and split in two via the portals with the warp villain immobilized by Katsuki, Izuku suddenly felt a lot better about their chances. Kurojairi, Shigaraki rasped, how could you let this brat get the jump on you? So Kurojairi was the warp villain's name. Great. Now Izuku could stop referring to him as the warp villain. You've gotten us into quite the pickle here, Shigaraki continued, one finger scratching at his neck. You got careless, you dumb villain, Katsuki gloated. It wasn't hard to figure you out. Only parts of you turn into that smoke-looking warp gate, and you use that mist to hide your actual body as a distraction, thinking that makes you safe. That's why we missed when we attacked you. An astute observation, Kurojairi rumbled. You truly live up to your school's reputation. Katsuki smirked. But, if you didn't have a body then you wouldn't be wearing this dumb neckpiece, right? You're not immune to physical attacks if they're well aimed. Some nice exposition, but now wasn't the time to gloat. Didn't Katsuki know the statistics about monologuing? Kurojairi's smog body shifted a little, and explosions crackled against his neck armor. Don't move. Try anything funny and I'll blow your butt up so bad that they'll be piecing you back together for weeks. Oh, that doesn't sound very heroic. Their stalemate didn't last long at all, as with a word from Shigaraki the Nomu was pulling itself from Kurojairi's portal. The arm and leg encased in ice shattered off, but the Nomu wasn't even phased. How was that thing still moving? Get out of the way, students. All Might warned, getting to his feet. The ice broke off of Nomu's side as new muscles and skin grew to replace the limbs that had been lost. I thought you said his power was shock absorption. I never said that was its only quirk, Shigaraki, and there really was no better word to describe it, simpered. It's also got super regeneration. Nomu's been modified to take on 100% of your power. It's basically a highly efficient punching bag that hits back just as hard. First, we need to free our method of escape. Get him, Nomu. Shock and muted gasps as the Nomu tore towards Katsuki, teeth bared and fist pulled back to strike. The shockwave from the punch sent everyone reeling back, a dust cloud swirling around it. When the dust cleared, Katsuki was nowhere to be seen. Kaken. Hold on a second. How did Katsuki get beside them? Did you dodge that? Kaken huffed. Shut up, no I didn't. DMN nerd. Wait, then how'd you get over here? Kirishima asked. Isn't it obvious? Todoroki said. Izuku's gaze followed Todoroki's over to where All Might was standing, a massive hole smashed into the wall behind him. The hero coughed into his elbow. All Might. There were furrows carved into the ground where All Might had been forced back, a testament to Nomu's strength. These are children, and you didn't hold back at all, All Might said, almost reprimanding. I didn't have much choice, Shigaraki rasped, he was threatening my companion. And besides, these kids are no angels, despite what some of them look like. The one with the wings breathed fire into my face at close range. What kind of hero does that? A hero in training who saw you try to kill one of his classmates right next to him, who panicked and acted on reflex, Izuku thought grumpily. Honestly, the nerve of this guy. He tries to kill multiple of your classmates and then gets upset when you defend yourself? What a hypocrite. Izuku did not say any of this because he quite liked living, though now that he thought about it he could probably have gotten away with it, given his whole coming back from the dead thing. Actually, would he be able to resurrect himself if he was disintegrated? That wasn't something he wanted to test. But that reminded him, his wings had been burning through his reserves for a while now and he wasn't using them. He let them drop, sweeping the remaining heat energy back into his body. You think you can get away with being as violent as you want if you say it's for the sake of others, Shigaraki continued. Well, you know what, All Might? That pisses me off. Why do some people get to decide that some violent acts are heroic and others are villainous? Casting judgment onto what's good and what's evil. You think you're the symbol of peace? You're just another government-sponsored instrument of violence. And violence always breeds more violence, I'll make sure the world understands that once you're dead. You're nothing but a lunatic, All Might said back, criminals like you always try to make your actions sound noble. But admit it, you're just doing this because you like it, isn't that right? We've got them outnumbered, Todoroki said from beside Izuku. Izuku nodded. And Kaken figured out the warp villain's weakness. These guys may act tough, but we can take them down now with All Might's help, Kirishima said, hardening his hands. Let's do this. Don't attack. All Might called, moving to stand between them and the villains. Get out of here. You would have been done for, if not for me earlier, Todoroki said coolly. You need our help. I thank you for your assistance, but this is different. It's going to be all right, just sit back and watch a pro at work. But you're too hurt, you're bleeding. And your dash. Izuku cut himself off before he could say anything incriminating. All Might gave him a thumbs up. Izuku wavered. Yes, All Might was hurt and running out of time, but he was the number one for a reason, right? Shigaraki said something, but it was too quiet for Izuku to tell what it was. Then he took off towards them. Heads up, we're fighting after all, Kirishima warned. Very astute observation there, it wasn't like they couldn't see the villain running towards them. Still, Izuku appreciated it. Kirishima was a good guy. All Might surged forward to meet the Nomu's punch, and after a brief interaction with Shigaraki threw himself into the fight, trading blows with the Nomu at a speed that Izuku's eyes couldn't keep up with. All Might's final punch, accompanied by a fitting cry of plus ultra, sent the Nomu flying up, crashing through the USJ's domed ceiling and disappearing into the sky beyond. I really have gotten weaker, All Might said, turning to face them. Back in my heyday, 5 hits would have been enough to knock that guy out. But today it took more than 300 mighty blows. In less than a minute, too. Now that was just impressive. Izuku thought he might cry, even more so when he noticed the steam curling off of All Might's body. The cloud around him did well to hide it, but his time was up. So, this was bad. There were still 2 villains left and All Might wouldn't be able to do anything. This was very bad. Surrender, All Might boomed. I think we all want to get this over quickly. Oh, so he was bluffing them. That made sense. Shigaraki, on the other hand, was shaking with barely contained rage. Probably homicidal rage too, knowing him. What's wrong? All Might continued. Not attacking me? Didn't you say you were going to clear this level earlier? Well, come and get me, if you dare. Man, this is intense, Kaken muttered. Izuku had been so caught up in the fight he'd almost forgotten that the other 3 were even there. Man, he really needed to work on his peripheral awareness. As I expected, Todoroki said, there's no reason for us to fight now. He'll handle this. Bit of an about-face from before, when he said that All Might needed their help, but sure. Maybe Todoroki assessed the situation and changed his mind. Come on Midoriya, Kirishima called, we should regroup with the other guys. Last thing we want to do is get taken hostage or get in his way. But Izuku was frozen to the spot. This wasn't right. There was no way. All Might could beat them. He was bluffing, he was out of time. And Izuku was the only one who knew. Like he'd noted before, the cloud of dust around the hero helped to hide it, but the steam curling off him was a sign that he was about to transform back. What? Are you scared? All Might baited. Shigaraki was shaking even more now, like a dog that had just gotten out of a river. His hand scratched at his jaw, though Izuku noted that he had one finger lifted carefully away. Kurojairi said something to him and Shigaraki stilled, hands lowering from his face. Around them, the small-time villains that Aizawa had taken down were starting to get back up. I think All Might can handle the two main guys, Kirishima said, oblivious. Let's make sure these dudes don't hurt anybody else. Midoriya, will you be joining us? Todoroki's words fell on deaf ears, as Izuku's attention was fixed on his mentor. I'm the only one who knows what's happening. There's no way he can move faster than the warp villain now. He has to have gone past his limit by now, there's no question about that. Shigaraki lunged forward towards All Might, the warp villain swirling in the same direction. Izuku, before he even realized he was moving, was throwing himself between them, one for all crackling in his legs as he launched himself forward. The bones in his legs shattered under the strain, reminding him why he didn't use one for all if he could help it. DMN. But it was fine. He could hit the one solid piece in Kurojairi. He could do this. Izuku gathered up as much heat energy as he could afford from his stores, preparing to blast it at the neckpiece as soon as he was close enough. A familiar hand emerged from the warp gate's inky depths, reaching towards Izuku's face with all 5 deadly fingers. I won't fall for that again. Kurojairi rumbled. Izuku dialed back the heat in his throat and breathed out a blast of heat, though at a lower concentration than he'd been preparing. Could Shigaraki disintegrate his face if he was missing fingers? Time to find out. Shigaraki stumbled back, howling in pain. Bang! Shigaraki reeled backward further as a projectile tore through his other hand. Izuku flopped to the ground. Oh, ow. The pain was hitting him now. This is why he tried not to use one for all. Super strength wasn't worth confetti bones. Sorry everyone, a light voice called. I know we're a bit late but I got the teachers over here as fast as I could. Izuku looked up to see what looked like most of UA's combat teachers standing at the top of the stairs. He could have melted from relief. Present Mike stepped up to blast down the villains who'd been trying to reach, and the ones that weren't, and Ectoplasm's clones quickly dispatched the ones that were still standing. "Aw man, the pros are here," Shigaraki said, and Izuku would have tried to shuffle further away if his legs were working. "It's game over, for real. Let's go home and try this when we dash." He was cut off by Snipe riddling him with bullets, and Kurojairi swarmed around him in a protective wall. 13 tried to SCK him in with their quirk, but Kurojairi still managed to warp them both away. Izuku shook like a leaf. "I'm sorry. I couldn't do anything to help you. If the pain didn't make him cry the self-loathing would." "That's not true," All Might said, and Izuku pushed himself into a sphinx-like position to look up at him. The smoke cleared just a little to show All Might, his body an amalgam of both his muscle and small forms. "You bought me a few vital seconds, if not for you I would be dead now. Young Midoriya, you have saved me once again." "Thank you, All Might." Yup, he was crying now. You know, he was surprised it took this long, in all honesty. "I'm just really glad that you're okay. Midoriya." "Hey!" Kirishima yelled. Izuku twisted around to see him running towards him. "Sorry, I can't get up right now," he called back. "What, are you okay?" What a nice guy Kirishima was. Always looking out for his friends. Were they friends? Maybe Izuku should amend that statement to always looking out for his classmates. Wait a second. If he kept running over he'd see All Might. Small Might? Half tall half small Might? Either way, it wouldn't be good. Izuku panicked. "Kirishima, wait." A wall, courtesy of Cementos, cut him off. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. Cementos directed Kirishima to rejoin their classmates, and the redhead ran off, yelling for Kaken and Todoroki to head to the exit with him. "Thanks for that, you saved my butt, Cementos," Small Might said tiredly. "Watch your profanity," Izuku muttered, a little deliriously. "My pleasure," Cementos said. "We should sneak you out of here and get you to the nurse's office." "Seriously All Might, that could have been really bad." "I had to act recklessly, or else I'd be dead now," Small Might said, "just goes to show how strong those villains were." Cementos ushered them out of the USJ, making a cement stretcher for Izuku, given the state of his legs. The 3 of them were shuttled back to campus, where Recovery Girl shoved them both into beds. Izuku had never been more grateful for her quirk. Sure, his pain tolerance was pretty good, but broken bones were nothing to scoff at. He was starting to think there was a trend starting, however. Both heroics classes had ended with him in Recovery Girl's office, and from what he could see from the window it was getting kinda late. Did his mom know he was going to be home late? The school would have told her, right? If not, he'd have to give his mom's number to one of his friends so they could let her know. Since it wasn't your fault, I probably shouldn't scold you for him being back here so soon, Recovery Girl said. Though I must say, and this was directed at Izuku, you're in far worse shape now than you were last time. A few seconds of slightly awkward silence passed before Mr. Yagi spoke up. I can't be sure, but I think I shortened my time limit in that fight. I pushed myself past my limit, and now I can only hope that I can still hold that form for an hour. Izuku looked down. I'm sorry. Nonsense, my boy, it's not your fault, Mr. Yagi reassured. Besides, there's no use worrying. These things happen. Excuse me, a new voice cut in. Izuku looked over to see a plain man in a tan trench coat standing in the doorway, a matching hat in his hands. Hi All Might, it's been a while. Mr. Yagi sat bolt upright, coughing up blood. I didn't know you were investigating. Whoa All Might, is it okay that he's seeing you like this? Izuku yelped. All Might's real name was secret for a reason, and since the man had called him by his hero name, the least Izuku could do was do the same. Oh, yeah. It's fine, this guy's alright, Mr. Yagi said. This is Tsukachi Naosama, my best friend in the police force. He's legit, I trust him. Izuku nodded, sitting back a little. That's quite an introduction, Tsukachi said, approaching the beds. Sorry to cut to the chase, but we could really use any information you might have. Hold on, before all that, tell me. Are all the students alright? And Aizawa, Eraserhead, and 13. Not counting this one dash, Tsukachi gestured at Izuku, the only student injuries were scrapes. And both 13 and Eraserhead are in stable condition right now, so you can relax. Izuku sagged against his pillows in relief, letting out a breath he didn't even realize he was holding. If you heroes hadn't risked your lives, the students wouldn't have made it. You three saved that entire class of kids today. You're not seeing the whole picture, Tsukachi, Mr. Yagi spoke. Those students also risked their lives, they fought as hard as us. Izuku blinked, fighting off tears. Damn it, he'd already cried multiple times today. Thank you All Might. I don't think there's ever been a group of first years who've experienced a real fight like this so early in their training, and not only survived but also learned what it means to be a pro, Mr. Yagi continued. Those villains made a mistake attacking them. This class is strong and filled with courage and drive. Mark my words, they'll become great heroes. Stop. He was going to make Izuku blush. All three adults in the room turned to stare at him amusedly. Did he say that out loud? Whoops. UA was closed the day after the USJ attack. Perhaps to give its students a rest, perhaps to go over its defenses. Probably both. Either way, it was hard to relax. Izuku spent most of his time as a blanket burrito, watching and rewatching some old All Might videos. He didn't know what his classmates had faced in the zones they were sent to at the USJ, though he doubted they were faring much better than he was. Still, whenever he closed his eyes, the image of Aizawa's splintering elbow hovered behind his eyelids. And if it wasn't Aizawa, it was Tsu crumbling. Or Ajuru. Sometimes it was All Might, portal closing around him and rendering the number 1 in 2. Strangely enough, he hardly ever saw Shigaraki's hand closing over his own face. Maybe because he wasn't even sure the villain could have killed Izuku? Nonetheless, Izuku didn't really feel up to interacting with anyone. His phone buzzed occasionally, but after assuring Ida and Uraraka that he was fine, he'd stopped answering them. Watching the videos, Izuku couldn't help but feel inadequate. All he and his classmates did was slow Aizawa and 13 down. If not for the teachers, none of them would have made it out of there. He was still so far from being a real hero that it wasn't funny. Even with All Might's power, he hadn't been able to do anything, besides break both of his legs. He'd been relying too much on his own quirk, pushing one for all to the back burner. He needed to work with it more, but it was hard to do so when all it did was break his bones. What he needed to do was to figure out what made it tick, and get stronger so that he could handle it. The power was immense, like a rushing river held behind a dam, and just as dangerous to get caught up in. He had to embody one for all, and make it his own. Like Pheonix. He didn't have these kinds of problems with Pheonix. Izuku huffed, burrowing further into his blankets. He bet All Might didn't break all his bones when he first got one for all. Returning to school was interesting, to say the least. No one else seemed nearly as fazed as he was, at least outwardly. They seemed more concerned with the media on them than the actual villains that attacked them. Attention! And there was Ida, right on cue. Homeroom class is about to begin. Everyone stop talking and take your seats. We're all sitting. Yeah, you're the only one standing. Ida returned to his desk, defeated. Though he did have a point, the desk behind Izuku was conspicuously empty, occupant nowhere to be seen. The door to the class slid open, and Izuku turned to see Aizawa standing, wrapped in bandages like a particularly tired mummy. Morning class. What a trooper. Though Izuku couldn't help but doubt how well he'd teach. He couldn't exactly write anything with his hands bound like that. Mr. Aizawa. I'm glad you're okay, Ida said loudly. You call that okay? Uraraka said, much less loudly, though Izuku could still hear her. My well-being is irrelevant, Aizawa said as he slouched over to his desk. Though, could you really call it a desk? It was more of a podium, really. What's more important is that your fight isn't over yet. Oh, don't tell me. The UA Sports Festival is drawing near. Ugh, why would he scare us like that? Let's go kick some butt. Kirishima cheered, only to be cut off by Kaminari's hand in his face. Wait a second dash. Jairu seamlessly picked up where Kaminari left off. Are you sure it's a good idea to hold the sports festival so soon after villains snuck inside? They could attack when we're all in the same place, Ajiru pointed out. Apparently the administration has decided that this is a good way to show that the threat has been handled, and that our school is safer than ever, Aizawa said flatly. Plus, they're beefing up security in comparison to past years. This event is a huge opportunity for every student at U.A, it's not something we can cancel because of a few villains. Personally, Izuku wouldn't have said that a few villains attacked them, but Aizawa was the teacher here. And he was right about this being an opportunity they couldn't afford to miss out on. Our sports festival is one of the most watched events in the entire world, Aizawa continued. In the past everyone obsessed over the Olympic Games, but then quirks started appearing and now the Olympics are far reduced in terms of both scale and viewership. For anyone who cares about competition there's only one tournament that matters, and it's the UA Sports Festival. And top heroes from everywhere will be watching, Yaoyorozu pointed out from behind him. This is where we get scouted. Well, unless you were dead. She's right, Kaminari said cheerfully. After graduating, lots of wannabe heroes join pro agencies as sidekicks. Yeah, well that's as far as some people go. They miss their chance to go indie and stay eternal sidekicks, Jairu said dryly back to him. You know, that's probably where you're headed. Aizawa, never one to waste a moment, brought the class's attention back to himself. It's true that joining a famous hero agency can garner you greater experience and popularity. That's why the festival matters. If you want to go pro someday, then this might just open a path for you. Well, everyone in the class was here to be a hero for one reason or another, why wouldn't they want to go pro? That statement seemed kind of redundant, in all honesty. 1 chance a year, 3 chances a lifetime. No aspiring hero can afford to miss this festival. That means you better not slack off on your training. Yes sir. Also, Mineta chose to drop out of the hero course, due to stress caused by the USJ attack. Class is dismissed. Without so much as a glance back, nor a moment to answer the questions that everyone was throwing at him, Aizawa shuffled out of the room. Okay then. Cementosa's lesson passed in a blur, and before he knew it lunchtime was upon them. You know, the villain stuff SCKS, but I'm pumped for these games. Kirishima hooped. Beside him, Siro grinned. We'll have to put on a good show, huh? Izuku watched everyone milling around the classroom, amazed by their enthusiasm. Sure, he was hyped too, but still. Seemed a little over the top. This is gonna be nuts, he said, mostly to himself. Everyone's so excited. Well of course we are. Ida said. Izuku jumped. He hadn't even realized the taller boy was near. DMN, Ida could be stealthy when he wanted to. Or maybe it was just that Izuku's spatial awareness wasn't particularly good. We enrolled in this school purely to become heroes, so naturally we're all getting fired up. Wow Ida, those are some interesting moves, as Tsu observed. Ida ignored her. You have to be excited too, right Midoriya? Well, yeah. I'm also a little nervous though, Izuku said sheepishly. Mido. Ida. Izuku jumped again. Why was everyone sneaking up on him all of a sudden? Let's do our best at the sports festival. Well that was intense. What's up girl? Ashido popped up behind him. You're normally like the most laid-back girl ever. Uraraka moved her fist into the air. Everyone, I'm gonna do my best. Izuku followed suit, fearing retribution if he didn't. Uraraka then turned on the others near enough to be on her radar, making Izuku glad that he'd cheered along with her. I said I'm gonna do my best. It sparked a few more half-hearted cheers and also the concern of some of their other classmates. Izuku took the opportunity to sweep her and Ida out of the classroom, and started heading towards the cafeteria. Hey Uraraka, I've been meaning to ask you something, he said conversationally. Sure, what's up? It's a little out of left field, but what was it that made you decide you wanted to come to UA? What made you want to be a hero? Oh, Uraraka looked away, blushing a little. It sounds really shallow, but pro heroes get paid a lot. You want to be a hero for the money? Izuku asked. Well, that wasn't what he'd expected. If we're cutting to the chase, then yeah, Uraraka said, rubbing the back of her neck. I know it sounds greedy, please don't think any less of me. I know you two have such admirable motivations. Not at all, Ida said, sounding offended at the very prospect of looking down on her. Your goal is to support your well-being, which is a perfectly admirable ambition to have. It's just a little surprising, Izuku added. Uraraka hid her face in her hands. You see, my family owns a construction company, but we haven't been getting a lot of work lately, so we're flat broke. It's not really something I tell other people. Construction, eh? Ida mused. Izuku snapped his fingers. If you got licensed, you could use your quirk to bring costs way down. And you could float everything so you wouldn't need all the heavy lifting equipment. That's what I've been saying. I've been telling my dad that since I was a kid. But, Uraraka trailed off, shaking her head. I'm going to become a pro, and sign with a good agency so I can make plenty of money. Then I'll be able to let my parents have an easy life. Ida burst into applause, and also possibly tears. Ah. Izuku jumped. Again. He seriously needed to work on his spatial awareness. Young Midoriya is here. All Might boomed. Whoa, All Might? Izuku asked. What are you doing here? Lunch. All Might held up the food in question. Do you want to eat with me? Well, that's adorable, Uraraka said, giggling. Ida nodded, and Izuku took off slowly in All Might's direction. Sure thing. I'll see you guys in class. Only 50 minutes? From across the table, Mr. Yagi nodded. I overdid it too many times, and that's about how long I can hold my power now. That Nomu was a particularly tough customer, it took a lot out of me. At this point I can barely even look like All Might for an hour and a half. Well, that wasn't good. I'm so sorry, Izuku said, hands bunching in his lap. I should have Mr. Yagi cut him off with what sounded like a laugh but could have also been a particularly bloody cough. You don't need to apologize for anything, kid. Man, you and me are alike. Izuku wasn't entirely sure he was meant to hear that last bit. I brought you here to talk about the festival, Mr. Yagi said. You're still struggling to control one for all, so what's your plan? Izuku tapped his fingers together, a little nervously. Well, I was planning on relying on Pheonix, so to avoid breaking any more of my bones. Though, I was wondering if after the festival you had any ideas about a pro I could intern with who could help me control it? Not that you're not a good teacher Izuku hastily backpedaled, but just someone with a similar quirk who also struggled with it? Or a mentor of yours? Across from him, Mr. Yagi looked like someone had kicked his puppy while simultaneously telling him he had to drink a cup of live spiders or else they'd do it again. It wasn't a good look. I don't have much time left as the world symbol of peace, Mr. Yagi said eventually, getting up to stare out the window. Soon I'll have to put that title to bed. And some villains out there are starting to notice. Someone has to step up and keep the people safe. Izuku got to his feet. He felt like he'd need to fall dramatically onto his stool at some point in this conversation. I gave you my power for one reason, so that you would be the hero to take my place. Mr. Yagi turned to fix him with a stare. Do you still feel the same way you did when we met? Do you still want to be a hero? What kind of question? Yes. Excellent. The time has come for you to prove it. The UA Sports Festival is something that the pros, no, the entire country will be watching very closely. I need you to think of it as your debut, as the fledgling symbol of peace, the next All Might. I want you to introduce yourself to the world, and proudly say I am here. Said fledgling symbol of peace was currently shaking in his boots like a particularly anxious leaf on a windy day. Well, that was a lot of pressure. There were people outside of one's door. A lot of them. One might go so far as to call it a horde. No matter what you called them, they were blocking the exit. Why the heck are you all here? Do you have business with our class? They're scouting out the competition, idiots. Ah yes. Kaken, right on cue. We're the class that survived a real villain attack, so they came to see us with their own eyes. Katsuki reached the door, and Izuku hoped desperately that he wouldn't blow anyone up. At least now you know what a future pro looks like. Now move it, you extras are in the way. You can't just call people extras because you don't know who they are. Ida protested. Izuku just sighed, resigned to their fate. The rest of the school was going to hate them now, weren't they? So this is Class 1A. Izuku's eyes were immediately drawn to the head of purple hair maneuvering its way to the front of the crowd. I heard you guys were impressive, the boy continued, but you just sound like an butt. Is the whole hero course delusional or is it just you? How sad it is to come here and find a bunch of egomaniacs. Well, that was rude. I wanted to be in the hero course, but like many others here I was forced to choose a different track. Such is life. I didn't cut it the first time around, but now I have a second chance. If any of us do well in the sports festival, the teachers can decide to transfer us to the hero course. And they'll have to transfer people out to make room. Izuku briefly flashed back to the empty desk behind him, and carefully didn't say anything. Some of my peers might be scouting out the competition, but I'm here to tell you that if you don't bring your very best, I'll steal your spot right out from under you. Consider this a declaration of war. Where did this guy even come from? There was a moment of charged silence, before it was broken in a rather brash manner by a self-proclaimed 1B student who only further proved the point that everyone hated them now. Great. Katsuki, as he was wont to do, ignored him and began pushing into the crowd. Dude, where are you going? Kirishima protested. It's your fault everyone hates us now, you gotta say something. These people don't matter. Kaken, classy as always. The only thing that's important is that I beat them. Well, he wasn't wrong, but still. Saying that people don't matter to their face wasn't a particularly polite move. Though Katsuki was hardly ever polite, so it was in character for him at least. Training made the remaining 2 weeks before the sports festival pass in a blur, and before Izuku knew it the morning of the festival was upon him. Inko fretted like she always did, but wished him the best as she ushered him out the door. Man, it SCKS that we can't wear our costumes, Ashido said, tugging on her sleeve. At least everyone will be in uniforms, Ajiru pointed out. It'll keep it fair. Ashido huffed but conceded the point. Everyone. We'll be entering the arena soon, so get your game faces on. Ida announced. Izuku hid a smile behind his hand. Ida's nerves were making him louder than usual. Midoriya. Well, wasn't this a surprise? Izuku hadn't talked to Todoroki a whole lot, the other teen tended to keep to himself, so this was rather strange. Hey Todoroki. Izuku gave what he hoped was a courageous smile. What's up? From an objective standpoint, I think it's fairly clear that I'm stronger than you. That was, out of nowhere. Okay, why not? It wasn't like he was wrong. But you've got All Might in your corner. I'm not going to pry about what's going on between you two, Todoroki continued, but know that I will beat you. What was with all these declarations of war lately? Kaminari voiced the exact same thought. Hey, what's the big deal? Kirishima said, getting up to defuse the situation. Why are you picking a fight all of a sudden? And right before we get started, too. Todoroki shrugged off the redhead's hand. We're not here to be each other's friends, don't forget, this isn't a team effort. He moved to leave, but Izuku spoke up before he could get too far. Hold on just a second, Todoroki. I'm not going to argue that you're not stronger than me, heck, you've probably got more potential than anyone else in the hero course. Don't you think you're being a little hard on yourself, Midoriya? Kirishima asked. And us? Well, he isn't wrong. All the other courses will be trying their hardest, and coming for us with everything they've got. Izuku looked down at his hands. We're all going to have to fight to stand out, and you aren't the only one aiming for the top. Todoroki's gaze sharpened, and Izuku couldn't help but feel like he was being picked apart. You can say you'll beat me, Izuku continued, but only time will tell. Words don't mean much, it's actions that matter. If you want to win you'll have to give it everything you've got, 'cause you can bet I will be. The silence around them was palpable, so thick it could be cut like a knife slicing through butter. Izuku tilted his head to one side. We should probably get going, they'll be expecting us in the stadium soon. Ida cleared his throat. Midoriya is correct, we should head out. Izuku fell into step beside him at the head of the pack as the class filed out of the waiting room and let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. That was like, super metal, Uraraka chirped, patting him on the back. Izuku gave a full-body shudder. I think I'm shaking. Am I shaking? That was the scariest thing I've ever done and we fought villains. He's not that bad, Uraraka mused, just a little emotionally constipated. Anything else she might have said was cut off by Present Mic's voice, amplified to fill the entire stadium. You know this first group as the first years who withstood a villain attack, and they're no strangers to the spotlight. Rising stars who dazzle with their solid gold skills, it's Hero Course Class 1A. Well, that was quite the introduction. Sun shining in his eyes, Izuku made his way out onto the field. The atmosphere was crushing, gigantic stands filled to bursting with spectators, all cheering. That is, a lot of people, he observed. I hope we're still able to give our best performances with all these eyes on us, Ida said, gaze firm. Though I suppose it's just one aspect of being a pro that we'll have to get used to. Present Mike sure did talk us up, came Kirishima's voice from behind, kinda makes me nervous. How are you feeling, man? I'm not worried. Just makes me want to win this thing even more. Ah yes, that was Katsuki's "I'm going to pulverize all these pipsqueaks and laugh while doing it" voice. He was surprised it hadn't made an appearance sooner. They've not been getting nearly as much screen time, but this next group is chock full of talent. Welcome Hero Course Class 1B. More students walked out onto the field. Izuku's hands shook. He'd spent all morning and a large portion of the previous evening lighting fires and storing the heat from their flames, so his reserves were decently full, but still. He couldn't help but be nervous. Present Mike announced the entry of the General Studies, Support and Business Course classes, though their introductions were far simpler than the Hero courses had been, just declaring the class number and what course they were in. All the students filed into a roughly square-shaped crowd in front of the umpire's box, where Midnight was standing. She snapped her whip in the air. And now, the introductory speech. Someone should probably talk to Miss Midnight about her costume, Kirishima said warily. Kaminari nodded. Agreed. That thing should come with a warning. Is it really appropriate apparel for a high school game? Tokoyami questioned. Silence, everyone. Midnight called, snapping the whip again. Now for the student pledge, we have Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku blinked. This wasn't going to end well. He's the first-year rep? Well, he did get first place in the entrance exam, Zero pointed out. A little ways away a Gen Ed student scoffed. Only for the Hero course exams. Ah, right. Sorry. That girl obviously hates us, Zero whispered. No kidding, Kaminari agreed, but we have Bakugo to thank for them not liking us. Izuku eyed the blonde as he made his way up the steps to the microphone. The blonde stared back, smirking. If any of you think you can beat me, try. It won't count as a win if you don't give your all. And I'm going to win. Just watch me. Well, that could have gone better. It could have also gone worse, which Izuku appreciated. The students around them didn't seem to share his sentiments, however, booing rather loudly. Ida yelled something about disrespect, arms chopping in a scandalized manner. He wasn't the only one either. Izuku ignored them all and bowed his head. It wasn't overconfidence, that was for certain. Katsuki was powerful, there was no doubt about that, but the old Kaken would have made it a joke by laughing. No. This was him pushing himself. And turning the rest of the class into targets at the same time. Great. Without further ado, it's time for us to get started, Midnight announced. This is where you begin feeling the pain, the first fateful game of the festival. She waved the whip in the direction of one of the large screens around the stadium, displaying a spinning roulette wheel. What could it be? The wheel spun, getting slower and slower. Eventually it slowed enough that Izuku could read the options as they spun around. It cycled past the floor as lava and dungeon crawl, before landing on obstacle race. Ta-da! It would appear that we have an obstacle course on our hands. Midnight turned to face the screen. All 11 classes will compete in a treacherous contest, the track being 4 kilometers around the outside of the stadium. I don't want to restrain anyone, at least in this game dash, she liked her lips, so as long as you stay on the track you're free to do whatever your heart desires. Izuku nodded. Okay. He could do this. This was probably one of the better options, with his Pheonix form he could just fly over the obstacles. Contestants, take your places. Izuku dutifully made his way over to the starting gate. He took a deep breath. The green lights above the gate blinked out, 1, 2, 3. Begin. Instantly the crowd took off into the tunnel, a crushing mass of bodies. And we're off. Present Mike cheered over the speakers. How about some color commentary, Mummy Man? How did you talk me into this? Aizawa's voice grumbled. Well, that was certainly a surprise. What should we be paying attention to in these early stages of the race? The doorway. Izuku wasn't really paying attention to the commentary. Rather, he was more preoccupied with the elbows and knees and various other body parts being shoved into his personal space. So this was the first test, seeing how they would get through this crushing mass of bodies. Izuku shifted, body shrinking as feathers and claws sprouted, and took off into the air. He swooped over the crowd beneath him, dodging the potshots that some of the other students took at him and breaking out high into the sky beyond the tunnel. The sound of complaints reached his senses. He risked a glance back to see that Todoroki had quite literally frozen the competition in place and was hot on his tail. Not literally, given that he was using ice rather than fire, but the point still stood. Still, not everyone had been iced to the ground. A number of students, mostly Izuku's classmates, had avoided the frozen prison and were in hot pursuit. Izuku didn't have time to worry about them, however, as he was forced to dodge out of the way of a robot dive-bombing him. Wait a moment. He was in the sky, how was a robot? He banked right, out of the way of another. It seems the first of our competitors has encountered one of our obstacles. Throughout the whole course are these robots, intent on knocking down anyone flying too high. Now that was just mean. These robots were smaller than the one-pointers from the exam, maybe the size of a person, but with the same green metal shells and glowing red eyes. And they had jetpack-like protrusions on each side, allowing them to lurch about in the sky with relative smoothness. Forced to focus on dodging instead of maintaining his lead, the gap between Izuku and the other competitors shrank dramatically, until there was no point in staying shifted. It wouldn't do him any good to keep in the sky if the robots were only going to drive him back. Izuku dropped to the ground, just ahead of the pack, and started running. Of course, this meant he was the first to reach the first obstacle. A horde of the robots from the entrance exam bore down on them, and Izuku could count a number of the gargantuan zero-pointers among their ranks. Well, this wasn't good. Izuku skidded to a stop, dirt flying where his sneakers dug into the ground. How to do this? He could always transform and try to fly over. There weren't that many of the small robots in the airspace around the bigger ones. A crowd started to form around him as more competitors arrived. He'd effectively lost his lead, but that was fine. He could make it up later. A wave of cold washed over him. Izuku turned to see Todoroki who, in an immense display of strength, had iced the zero-pointers over and halted them in their tracks. A chill went down Izuku's spine. Glancing forward revealed that Todoroki had already taken off under the gargantuan zero-pointers' frozen forms, and Izuku wasted no time in shifting and taking to the sky. He couldn't lose. Not after his big speech in the prep room. It was fairly easy to avoid the robots in Pheonix form, and as soon as he was safely past them Izuku dropped to the ground and ran. He didn't have time to waste on dodging the flying robots, so running it was. The second obstacle was an enormous pitfall. Izuku grinned. Fantastic. It was almost too perfect. Where the others around him stopped to stare, Izuku lunged, no hesitation as he leapt into the gaping chasm. He plummeted for a second or two before shifting and spreading his wings wide to catch the updraft. He rocketed upwards, flames trailing from his feathers as he burst from the pit with a victorious caw. Back in the lead. Nice. Take that, Todoroki. The audacity, making a declaration of war and then not following up with it? TSK. He didn't bother shifting back this time, instead electing to fly close to the ground in order to avoid the flying robot's wrath. Why didn't he think of that before? Ugh, he was an idiot. And then he was cold. Immeasurably cold, like he'd been dunked in a tank of ice water in the middle of winter. Frozen. Todoroki had frozen him, encased him in ice like those zero-pointers, but this felt like the ice was thicker. To keep him in place, probably. Suspended mid-flight like a bird-human popsicle, Izuku could do nothing but watch as Todoroki swept past him. Well, that was just rude. Izuku couldn't shift back to use one for all, so breaking out that way was out of the question. The chill was oozing through his feathers, making it hard to think. If he was able to move, Izuku would be shivering like there was no tomorrow. God, it was cold. Izuku didn't think he'd ever been this cold before. There was a roar of flame, and the world went dark around him. Izuku came to consciousness in stages, then all at once. He was also cradled in a pair of large hands, but seemed slightly less important. He blinked up at Mr. Yagi, who seemed a lot bigger than he remembered him being. Last he checked he wasn't small enough to fit in a pair of hands. Ah, young Midoriya? Mr. Yagi asked. Izuku chirped. It looked like he was in the teacher's box, given the number of UA staff members in seats around him. It's got his scent, Hound Dog rumbled. Izuku shied away from him. Logically, he knew that Hound Dog didn't mean him any harm, but the alarm bells in his head were ringing. He's very cute like this, 13 cooed. They moved closer, and Izuku caught sight of his reflection in the black visor of their helmet. He was a bird. But a tiny bird. A tiny baby bird. A tiny little bird with beady black eyes, downy orange-yellow feathers and stubby little wing nubs. 13 was right, he was cute, in a first evolutionary stage Pokemon sort of way. Well, this was new. But how? The last thing he remembered was being iced over by Todoroki in the obstacle race. He knew he was more vulnerable to the cold than most people, barring maybe Tsu? Still though, how much more vulnerable in his Pheonix form was he, that being frozen made him black out before he could melt his way out? Though if he just blacked out, why was he a chick now? Because he was very clearly a baby bird. He nipped at one of Mr. Yagi's fingers to get his attention. Young Midoriya? Do you know what happened to you? Well, there went that theory. He was hoping that Mr. Yagi knew. DMN. That was unfortunate. The last thing he remembered was being iced by Todoroki during the obstacle race. He racked his brain, trying to think of potential mythological Pheonix reasons why he was a tiny bird. Then it hit him. In some stories when a Pheonix reached a certain point in their lifespan, they'd turn to ashes and be born anew. Was that what had happened here? It seemed likely. We were very worried when you disappeared, Mr. Yagi said, eyebrows furrowed. As were your friends. Young Ida and Uraraka came to midnight to request we look for you, though we were already on the case. Are you alright? Izuku chirped in lieu of response. Has this happened to you before? Mr. Yagi asked. Are you able to turn back? Izuku closed his eyes and concentrated. It looked like he could not turn back, at least not now, so he shook his head as best he could. Mr. Yagi frowned. I suppose there is no way to tell how long this will last, then. Izuku really wished he could talk right now. It'd be nice to be able to express his thoughts outside of his own head. We've let your friends know that you've been found, and that you're safe, 13 piped up. Well, that was reassuring. We think it best that you stay here in the teacher's box with us until the festival is over, Mr. Yagi said, in case there are any unforeseen complications. That way we'll be able to get you to Recovery Girl as fast as possible. Izuku didn't have any objections to that, and even if he did, it wasn't like he'd be able to voice them. And the teachers did have the best view of the arena. I'm afraid that you missed the second round, young Midoriya, but they just finished the break games, so you can watch the tournament round if you would like. Izuku would like that, yes. He hopped up onto the edge of the box to peer down, where it appeared the tournament was just starting. The first match, as Present Mike announced loudly, pitted Aoyama against the purple-haired boy from 1C. The start of the match was called, and the purple boy said something. Aoyama responded, and then it was over? Aoyama turned away, walking right out of bounds. She was far away, so it was unclear, but Midnight looked shocked as she declared the purple boy, Shinso, the winner. That was quite the quirk, Izuku mused. It had to have been Shinsu's quirk, right? Aoyama wasn't the type to give up the spotlight just like that. He didn't have time to deliberate on that, however, as the next match was quickly announced. Izuku's heart sank in his chest with a kind of horrified glee. Kaken vs Todoroki, huh? This ought to be interesting. Immediately after the start of the fight was called, Todoroki sent out a massive glacier of ice, frosty spikes gleaming in the light. Izuku could feel the chill from where he perched on the edge of the teacher's box. Kaken, of course, wasted no time in blasting his way free of the iceberg and sending a barrage of explosions towards Todoroki. The other teen swiftly blocked them with a shield of ice, and Kaken yelled something at him. Todoroki said something back, and the fight resumed. It was awe-inspiring, the power those two held. Explosions blocked by sheets of cold, icy spikes demolished by fiery blasts. It was like watching two titans clash. Todoroki said something that Izuku didn't quite catch, but apparently Kaken did, given that he quite literally started steaming. Stop half-assing it, he roared, loud enough for even Izuku to hear him. Who gives a shit what he thinks? It's your DMN power, not his. Todoroki stared at him, eyes wide, and his left side burst into flame. Ooh. Pretty. Izuku liked fire, sue him. Izuku couldn't really see, but he'd be willing to bet that Kaken was grinning like a maniac. Well, you couldn't say that Kaken doesn't give his all, Izuku though absently as he watched Katsuki lunge forward, howitzer in full swing. An ear-splitting boom sounded out and a cloud of smoke filled the arena. Izuku hopped towards the edge a little for a better look, waiting with bated breath. When the smoke faded, it was revealed that both opponents were unconscious, though. Todoroki is out of bounds. Midnight announced. Bakugo wins. Izuku tilted his head to one side consideringly as the medbots wheeled in to carry the two unconscious teens away. Kaken wouldn't be happy with that victory, if he even considered it one. In comparison, the next match, Kirishima vs Tetsutetsu from 1B was almost boring, ending with a tie. Then Ida vs Hatsum was just a 15-minute long advertisement for Hatsum's inventions. Kaminari vs Shiozaki was interesting at least. Izuku was almost thankful for how short it was after how long the two previous had been. Ashido vs Zero was predictable, Ashido triumphing easily after melting through all of Zero's tape and kicking him out of bounds. Second to last in the first bracket was Yayorozu vs Tsu, which ended with Yayorozu victorious, though it was a close thing. Finally came Uraraka vs Tokoyami, which, as ferociously as Uraraka fought, was unfortunately very one-sided. Izuku was torn on who to root for. On one hand, Uraraka was a good friend, but on the other hand he and Tokoyami were both birds. Decisions. In the end, it didn't really matter as Dark Shadow, who already paid no mind to gravity, deftly pushed Uraraka from the ring in a series of quick attacks. A short break was called as they prepared for the second bracket of battles, and after a few minutes of comfortable silence past Izuku chirped to grab Mr. Yagi's attention. You have quite the talented classmates, Mr. Yagi said. Izuku made a warbling noise of agreement, settling back down to watch Kirishima and Tetsutetsu's tiebreaker. Kirishima won, which cued the start of the second bracket. Shinso and Kaken made their way onto the field. Katsuki looked a little bruised, but mostly none the worse for wear. As soon as the start of the match was called, Kaken was lunging forward, palms crackling. Shinso did a pretty good job of dodging the first few blows, but his lucky streak didn't last long. Izuku winced as he took an explosion-boosted punch to the chest, sending him tumbling to the ground. His tone somewhat panicked. Shinso yelled something. Izuku caught the words, friend, and coward, and Kaken blew up. Literally. What did you just say, you dash? And then it was over. Blank-faced, Katsuki walked out of the ring and into the entranceway, and Shinso collapsed with what looked like a sigh of relief. Izuku was not looking forward to dealing with Kaken when Shinsu's quirk wore off. The second fight, Kirishima vs. Ida, went quickly, Ida speeding around to send Kirishima out of bounds before the redhead could even think about using his own quirk. Ashido vs. Shiozaki took quite a bit longer, though went similarly to Ashido vs. Zero, Ashido melting through Shiozaki's vines with ease. The last fight, Yaoyorozu vs. Tokoyami, was almost as quick as Kirishima vs. Ida, Dark Shadow sending Yaoyorozu over the line with a series of swift shoves. This time there wasn't a break between brackets, and Shinso and Ida made their way onto the field. Shinso said something, and Ida, bless his heart, had not learned anything from Shinsu's other matches and responded. Quickly, Ida was out of the ring, and Shinso had won. Izuku was honestly impressed. Shinso had laid down his declaration of war and was sticking to it. Izuku could respect that. Ashido's acid didn't do much against Dark Shadow, so the last match of the semifinals, Ashido vs. Tokoyami, was rather one-sided. Ashido was sent out of bounds, and Present Mike called for another short break before the finals. Izuku hopped back a little, rustling his feathers. He wished he was down there. Watching the matches was cool and all, but he didn't even make it past the first round. He told Todoroki that he'd be doing his best, and for what? To fail immediately? Pathetic. Present Mike announced the start of the finals, and Izuku watched as Shinso and Tokoyami made their way onto the field. It was over almost as fast as it begun. Tokoyami wasn't much of a talker, and didn't take Shinsu's bait, sending him out of the ring with a series of strikes from Dark Shadow. Mr. Yagi cleared his throat. I'm afraid I have to leave for a few minutes, but the other teachers will take care of you in my absence. Izuku nodded, and Mr. Yagi took his leave. It was quickly clear why exactly he had to go when All Might fell from the sky to hand out the medals. Ida, though he would have shared third with Ashido, was nowhere to be seen. Izuku was not loving being stuck as a bird. The first-year stage of the sports festival had been on a Friday. It was now Saturday, and Izuku had, with his mother's assistance, built a blanket nest on the couch and had settled in to watch the second years compete on the television. It was amazing how much better grasps the second years had on their quirks compared to Izuku's year, but he couldn't bring himself to enjoy it all that much. If what he'd woken up as was comparable to a cute first evolutionary stage Pokemon, he could confidently say that he was now in the awkward middle stage. But he was willing to bet this was a good sign. If he was growing at such a quick pace, maybe he'd be able to shift back to human once he was an adult? Only one way to find out, he supposed. He watched absently as one of the second years on screen, blue-skinned with an animal morphing quirk, sent her opponent, laser vision quirk with a support item visor that the animal quirk girl had knocked off his face, out of the ring with a well-placed kick. Present Mike announced that the animal girl was the winner of the finals, and Izuku switched off the TV. Back when he was young he would have been foaming at the mouth to watch the awards ceremony, but there wasn't much point now. Inko had taken the day off of work to watch over him, and a rustling sound alerted him to her presence before she settled onto the couch beside him. Did you enjoy watching the festival? She asked, running her fingers through his mane of feathers. Izuku nodded. No sense in making her sad. She made an affirming hum. Were there any quirks you especially liked? Izuku hesitated for a moment before nodding again. Nothing had really stood out, in all honesty. The animal girl's quirk had been pretty cool, and the animals she turned into had all been blue, which was fun. There had been some really cool quirks showcased, like the boy who had literally eaten the bricks his opponent had thrown at him, or the girl who turned into smoke, but he couldn't really bring himself to care. He just wanted to be himself again. Do you want to watch the third years tomorrow? Izuku shuffled his wings in an approximation of a shrug. Inko sighed fondly, running her fingers through his feathers one more time before standing up. I'm going to start on dinner. Do you want to sleep down here again? Sunday arrived, and finally Izuku could compare himself to a final evolutionary stage Pokemon. If anything, he was pretty sure he was bigger than usual. His Pheonix form's wingspan was normally a little over 2 meters, and now he was fairly certain that they stretched to 2.5 meters. The question was, did this growth happen because he was a growing boy, or due to his reset? He'd taken to referring to his deaths as resets. It made him less uncomfy talking about them. There was no way to know unless he reset again while in Pheonix form, and he didn't plan on doing that anytime soon. He missed his opposable thumbs. But now that he was big again, did that mean that he could turn back now? Only one way to find out. He closed his eyes and focused, imaging fingers instead of feathers and toes instead of claws, of a nose and mouth instead of a beak and arms instead of wings. A wave of joy washed over him as he felt the familiar itch as his limbs stretched and morphed, his bones creaking. A wide grin spread across his face and Izuku brought his hands up to run them over his cheeks, but a stinging pain brought his hands jolting away from his face. He looked at his hands, noticing the sharp talons where his fingernails should be. Very gently, he tapped the pads of his fingers against the pained cheek, and winced as they came away red. Mom, he called. There was a flurry of movement as Inko dashed through the door, and skidded to a halt. Oh Izuku, she cried, you're back. She went to sweep him into a hug, and Izuku backed away. Sorry I can't hug you right now, Izuku said, holding his hands up. I don't want to hurt you. He gestured towards his face, where he was willing to bet blood was still seeping from the shallow slice in his cheek. I'm just so glad you're back, Inko said softly. She moved closer, bringing one hand up to cup his cheek and gently wiping away the blood with her thumb. Let's get you cleaned up, okay honey? She took his hand where he'd been carefully keeping it by his side and led him to the bathroom, where she disinfected and bandaged the wound. It was only a shallow slice, so a Hawk's band-aid did the job just fine. Izuku stared at his hands. Do we have anything I can file these down with? He asked. I don't want to hurt anyone. Inko looked over from where she'd been putting his box of hero band-aids back in the cabinet. I'm sure there'll be some special gloves we can buy that'll stop you from hurting anyone, including yourself. We can go to the mall today, it's open on Sundays. Are you sure? Wouldn't it just be easier to file them? Inko took both of his hands in hers. They were so much smaller than his, Izuku noted absently. Honey, if you really want to file them down you can, but I'm worried that'll hurt you. We can go to the same place that we buy your undershirts from. They make things especially for people with bird-like quirks, they'll definitely have protective gloves. Izuku let out a deep breath. Okay. It was raining as Izuku made his way to school on Monday, and he was miserable. Despite being all bundled up in special water-retardant boots, a rain hat over his beanie, no less than 2 raincoats, his new protective gloves, made of dark leather with special padding in the fingers, his scarf wrapped firmly around his neck, and an umbrella, Izuku was cold and wet and pathetic. He almost wished he'd stayed stuck as a bird longer, just to have an excuse to stay home out of the rain. That was if UA took "I'm stuck as a bird" as a valid reason to stay home from school. Good morning Midoriya. I am glad to see that you are all right. Izuku turned to see Ida sprinting towards him, also in a raincoat. No umbrella or scarf though, so Izuku won this round. Why on earth are you walking so slowly? You'll be late. Late? There are still 5 minutes until the bell, Izuku protested, but ran to fall into step behind him. UA students should always arrive 10 minutes early, don't you think? With those encouraging words, Ida sped off towards the school gate. How was he so awake? Izuku felt like he might fall asleep at any moment, but wet weather tended to do that to him. Nonetheless, Izuku hurried after him, only catching by the lockers where Ida was removing his raincoat. Izuku shook off his umbrella and took off his hats. So, Ida dash. If it's about my brother, don't be concerned, Ida interrupted. I'm sorry if I made you worry. It wasn't, Izuku stammered. I was going to congratulate you on getting third. What happened to your brother? Ida's brows furrowed. You mean you don't know? Izuku looked away as he removed his own raincoat. He was glad it had a zip, buttons would have been too fiddly with his gloves. I was a bit out of it this weekend. You did disappear after the first round, Ida acknowledged. My older brother was attacked by a villain during the sports festival. A gasp caught in Izuku's throat. Wait, Ingenium's hurt? Is he going to be okay? Ida smiled, his voice oddly calm. Tensei is in a stable condition, so there's no need to worry. Everything is fine. At that he turned and left, leaving Izuku alone. Izuku frowned at his friends retreating back. Something wasn't right. Still, he put the rest of his rain gear away and headed to class. The bell was going to ring soon and Aizawa wasn't the type to accept lateness. He stepped through the door just in time to catch what Ashido was saying. It's so weird that people recognize us from TV, she said. Everyone wanted to talk to me on my way here. Yeah, me too, Kirishima said as Izuku sidled past. By some dumb luck, no one had noticed him yet. People on the street were staring at me, Hagakure said, the position of her sleeves showing that her hands were clasped together. It was kind of embarrassing. From beside her, Ajiru shook his head. Sure, but isn't that pretty normal for you? You wouldn't believe what a bunch of elementary school brats yelled at me, Zero complained. Nice try? Tsu guessed. Ag. All it took was one sports fest and we're basically celebrities. Izuku settled into his chair and chose that moment to speak up. Speak for yourself, guys. At least you got things yelled at you. No one even noticed me. In a split second, Katsuki turned around and slammed a thankfully non-smoking hand on Izuku's desk. The class fell silent. Izuku, you bstrd. You laid down that declaration and didn't follow through. Izuku just smiled and gently pushed Katsuki's face away. It wasn't exactly my choice. Quirk malfunction, you know? Katsuki scowled and turned away. Izuku was thankfully spared any further interaction by the door sliding open and everyone bolting to their seats. A bandage-less Aizawa slouched in with an eternally tired morning. Good morning, Mr. Aizawa, the class chorused back dutifully, before Tsu spoke up, saying exactly what was on Izuku's mind. Ribbit. Mr. Aizawa, you don't have bandages on anymore, that's good news. The old lady went a bit overboard with her treatment, Aizawa said, taking his place at his little podium. Anyways, today we have a big class on hero informatics. Wasn't hero informatics just a fancy way of saying hero names? This was another logical ruse, wasn't it? You need code names, Aizawa continued, it's time to pick your hero identities. This is gonna be totally awesome. Aizawa's eyes flashed red and everyone quickly sat back down. This is related to the pro hero draft picks I mentioned last time we were in class. Normally students don't have to worry about the draft yet, not until their second or third year actually, but your class is different. In fact, by extending offers to first-year students like you, pros are essentially investing in your potential. Any offers can be rescinded if their interest in you dies down before graduation though. So what you're saying is that we're still going to have to prove ourselves after we've been recruited? Hagakure asked. Correct. Now Aizawa pressed a button and a series of names and numbers were projected onto the blackboard beside him. Here are the totals for those of you who got offers. Izuku quickly scanned the list. Tokoyami was in first, with Ishido and Todoroki close behind. There a bit of a divide between those three and the rest of the class, the difference between offer numbers being a few hundred at the least. Ida, Katsuki and Yaoyorozu were next, and the rest were spread fairly evenly between the others on the list. Izuku was not on that list. It made sense at least, that he didn't get a single offer. He did disappear halfway through the first round. Despite these results, Aizawa said, shutting up the whisperers with a well-placed glare, you'll all be interning with pros. Even those of you who didn't get any offers. Oh, so we'll all be interning, Izuku muttered. Apparently Aizawa heard him, as he responded with, yes. You already got to experience combat with real villains during the attack on the USJ facility, but it'll still be helpful to see pros in action. Up close and personal, in the field, firsthand. And for that we'll need hero names, Sata said. Things are sure getting a lot more fun. Uraraka cheered. These hero names will likely be temporary, Aizawa said, but you better take them seriously or dash. Midnight burst through the door. You'll have hell to pay later. Had she just been waiting outside the door for that cue? How long had she been there? What you pick today could be your codename for life. You'd best be careful or you could end up with something entirely indecent. She's got a good point, Aizawa allowed. Midnight is going to have final approval over all of your names, as it's not my forte. The name you give yourself is important. It'll reinforce your image and show what kind of hero you'll be in the future. A codename tells people exactly what you represent. Katsuki passed a couple of whiteboards back to him. Izuku took one and passed the last whiteboard back, having to awkwardly reach over the desk where Mineta used to sit to give it to Yaoyorozu. He turned back to face the front and stared at his whiteboard. A hero name, huh? He'd been planning potential hero names since before his quirk came in, the first time, but looking back, none of them really worked. Pheonix was too on the nose, he didn't want his hero name to be the same as his quirk name. Vulcan didn't really fit either. Cinder would work, but it was a little plain. He'd really liked the sound of the name Icarus for a while, before he remembered the story behind it. No, crashing and burning was not the vibe he was going for. Izuku tapped the capped marker against his lips. He needed something that embodied the type of hero he wanted to be someday. Apparently more time had passed than he thought, as Midnight spoke up. Now students, who among you is brave enough to share? Wait, they were presenting these now? To get shot down in front of the whole class? Izuku winced, shrinking in his seat. Who was brave enough to go first? His question was soon answered, as Aoyama pranced to the podium. Hold your breath. I am the shining hero, my name is I cannot stop twinkling. You cannot deny my sparkle. Midnight took the whiteboard from him and crossed out a few things. It'll be better this way. Take out the I and shorten can not to can't. It's stunning, mademoiselle. Spurred on by Aoyama's success, Ashido bounced to the front and proclaimed her codename to be Alien Queen. Izuku liked it, but it was quickly shot down by Midnight, who said it was too scary. A few more names passed. Tsu became Froppy, and Kirishima Red Riot in an homage to the old hero Crimson Riot. Izuku eyed his blank whiteboard. More people chose their names, Ashido finally getting a name that Midnight approved with Pinky. In front of him, Katsuki got up to present. Well, this ought to be good. Izuku was willing to bet his name would contain at least one word out of explosion and murder, and any variant on the word ruler or best. King Explosion Murder. Izuku grinned into his scarf. I'm thinking that's a little too violent, Midnight dismissed, and Katsuki scowled all the way back to his desk. Izuku patted him on the back as he took his seat. You'll figure something out, he muttered cheerfully. He was so distracted by the wrath he willingly brought onto himself that he almost missed Uraraka getting up to present. This is the name I thought of, she said, turning her whiteboard to the front. Uravity. Oh, I absolutely love that, Midnight said. Good work. You know, choosing names is going faster than I thought it would. The only ones left are Bakugu, who needs to rethink his, and Ida and Midoriya. Ida got up and stood at the front. Was Izuku the only one who noticed how his hands were shaking? You're using your real name too? Midnight observed. All right. Well, Midoriya, are you ready to present? Oh. It was him. Yeah. He got to his feet and made his way to the podium. I've been thinking about this for a while. He took a deep breath. Like the phoenix that rises from the ashes, I too will get back up whenever I'm knocked down. I'm the persevering hero, Rise. Izuku's internship was going great. He'd been worried about it, considering his subpar performance at the sports festival hadn't netted him any offers, but Mr. Yagi had pulled through and got him an internship with his own old teacher. Granted, Gran Torino's fake death had been slightly traumatizing, but the fact that he'd helped Izuku figure out how to use one for all without breaking his bones definitely outweighed all the cons. Still, Izuku couldn't help but be worried about Ida. He knew the other boy had chosen to intern with the hero manual, in Hosu, which was where his brother had been attacked. That had to be more than a coincidence. But Izuku couldn't reconcile strong, straight-laced Ida with someone who'd go after Stain as revenge. Though, he supposed that most people had hidden depths. He'd been avoiding using Pheonix in any way while training one for all, and even without it had nearly landed a hit on the older hero. His self-esteem was at an all-time high, though whether that was a good or a bad thing was yet to be seen. We should switch up your training, Gran Torino mused. Get too used to fighting against my distinct style and you'll pick up bad habits. What habits? I'm just trying to keep up with you right now. Izuku protested. Please, let me fight more. Gran shook his head. Nope, we're done here. Grab your costume, boy. We're moving on to Phase 2. Huh? Phase 2 turned out to be going out to fight actual villains. Izuku wasn't quite sure how to feel about that. Still, he followed Gran Torino onto the bullet train and took a seat. Hey, did you see that? A building exploded. Izuku turned to look over the seat at the person who had spoken. Huh? What's the ruckus? Some kind of fire? Izuku guessed. Passengers, please hold on to your seats, an automated feminine voice sounded. Anything more she might have said was cut off by what looked like a hero being thrown through the wall of the train. What the hero said, before a large hand grabbed his face and smashed him into the train's floor. Well, that was disturbingly familiar. A chill went down Izuku's spine as the rest of the creature was revealed, including the signature exposed brain of the Nomu who'd attacked the USJ. This one was different though, it had no beak and its skin was a pale gray-green. Nomu! Izuku jumped to his feet. I want you to stay back, you hear me? Gran Torino barked, before zooming off to kick the Nomu clear out of the train. Gran Torino! Izuku shouted, running to the side of the train. He looked out and gasped. The city was on fire, the night sky painted in hues of red and gold as clouds of dark smoke billowed up from flaming buildings. He could almost hear the sounds of people screaming. He'd said it before and he'd say it again. This certainly wasn't good. What looked like the train conductor was saying something, but Izuku paid him no mind. Keep them calm, Izuku said, I'm going after him. Hey, are you nuts? The conductor called after Izuku's retreating back. It's way too dangerous out there. After a moment's hesitation, Izuku shifted, and with a flap of his wings was climbing high into the sky. Yes, it was dangerous, but that didn't scare him. Death didn't frighten him anymore. The Nomu looked different, but there couldn't be that many people with brains spilling out of their heads and eyes that wild. This had to be connected to the League of Villains. It had to be. On the streets below him, Izuku could see people screaming and running. By that logic, they had to be running away from the danger, so Izuku banked in the direction they were all coming from. Tenya! Where are you, Tenya? Izuku balked at the shout. Had something happened to Ida? Manual, stop the fire. Someone else yelled. Well, Izuku could do him one better. He dove in and drew all the fire towards him, effectively snuffing it out and filling his reserves quite nicely. The blue-clad hero blinked at him, and Izuku flew away, mind-whirring. That was definitely Manual, the hero Ida had been interning with. But why would Ida run away with such a big disaster going on all around him? He was too righteous for that. Wait. Hosu, where the hero killer attacked Ingenium. Oh, don't tell him. Izuku had his suspicions, but he would have done almost anything to make sure he wasn't right. Izuku winced and climbed higher into the air. This really wasn't good. Stain couldn't kill him, not permanently, but Ida? He'd be dead. Forever. Izuku couldn't forgive himself if anything happened to him. Izuku swept over the city, until his sharp eyes picked up a glint of white and red in an alleyway. Izuku dove towards it, shifting back mid-dive to slam all of that momentum into Stain to knock him away from Ida's prone form. Gold lightning flickered around him as he channeled one for all through his body. It was only at about 1 or 2%, but still enough to let him land without breaking anything from the impact. Who's there? Ida said quietly from behind him. Midoriya? How dash. Izuku let one for all fizzle away. He'd save it for when he needed it. And he couldn't afford to be killed either. Ida looked in bad enough shape that the ensuing explosion might kill him. Izuku bolstered his courage. It wouldn't do for Stain to see how frightened he really was. Not for himself, but for those around him. Don't worry, Ida. I'm going to save you. The blow hadn't been enough to knock Stain over, but it did push him back. The hero killer's eyes widened as if in recognition, before narrowing. You found him too? Ida managed. But how? I saw it on TV. They had some stats about the hero killer. Most of his victims were found where there weren't many people, so in order to find you I needed to search far away from the panic. Izuku risked a glance back at Ida, still prone on the ground. Come on, we've got to get back to the main streets to get help from the pros. I can't move my body, Ida said. It must be his quirk. Since he cut me I've been paralyzed. Sounds about right, Izuku muttered. That's the kind of quirk people were thinking that he had. I suppose purely physical augmentation type quirks aren't much good for fighting him, then. Izuku's gaze landed on an older hero, slumped against the alley wall, and he frowned. If it had only been Ida he could probably carry him away, but he definitely wasn't strong enough to carry two people at a pace that would outspeed Stain. DMN. Okay, he could do this. Protect Ida and the other hero until another pro arrived, preferable one with a quirk that didn't require physical movement to use it. Midoriya, please. Izuku glanced back at Ida, whose face was screwed up in either pain or anguish. It was hard to tell. This doesn't have anything to do with you. Ida, what dash? You showed up to save your friend's life, the hero killer said, you even made a big entrance. But I have a duty to kill him and this so-called hero. When your friend chose to fight me it guaranteed that the weaker of us would be culled. So, what will you do? Big words from someone without a nose, Izuku spat, sneaking one hand behind his back to tap out a message on his phone. Stain just needed to keep his eyes on Izuku's face, not his hands. If your goal is to clean up society, then shouldn't your name be Mr. Clean, not Stain? Behind him, Ida made a cut-off noise that could have either been a cough or a laugh. What are you doing, kid? The hero choked out. Don't taunt him. The phone made a soft ding, confirming that his location had been sent. If he sent it to all his contacts then hopefully someone who could help would call a pro. Right? Listen to me. Ida's voice was almost pleading. Stand down. Run away. I told you, this has nothing to do with you. If you really believe that, then why are you even trying to become a hero in the first place? Izuku's hero costume gloves were different from his new ones, namely that they were fingerless. As much as he wanted to clench his fists, he couldn't, unless he wanted to cut himself, and he did not have time for that right now. There are plenty of things I'd like to say to that, but they'll have to wait. Izuku took a ready stance, baring his talons. All Might was right though. Meddling when you don't need to is the very essence of being a hero. The hero killer laughed, and Izuku lunged. Better to keep his fire breath under wraps until he needed it, make the hero killer think the transformation and the talons were his quirk. Though, he had seen the lightning that One for All caused, so Izuku activated that as well. Power thrummed lowly through his veins as he ducked under the sword and leapt up to slash at Stain's face. He landed a little ways away, gold lightning crackling around him. Did he get him? His talons were tipped with red now, so he had to have at least scratched him. He looked up just in time to see Stain lick his blade, which was really gross, by the way. How was he not getting all kinds of diseases, and his muscles locked in place? Oh, this was very much not good. Did Stain cut him without his noticing? He knew he needed more body armor on his costume. Stain approached almost leisurely, and Izuku's gaze fixed onto the blood, little as there was, dripping from his sword. That had to be it. Izuku hadn't been paralyzed until Stain had liked the sword, so that had to be the activation requirement. But was it just the blood touching his tongue, or did it have to be ingested? Izuku had so many questions. You're not powerful enough, Stain said, almost conversationally. It's not that you predicted my movements, just left my field of vision and maneuvered so you'd be able to get in a clean shot. But I saw through your plan. All right, no need to gloat, Izuku muttered. It didn't seem like Stain heard him, as he continued to talk. There are countless false heroes around here who are all talk, but I think you're worthy of staying alive. You're different from these two. That's a really weird compliment. Stain paid him no mind, instead approaching Ida with his sword raised. Hey Stain! Izuku yelled. Leave him alone. You say he's unworthy of the title of hero, but that's the thing. Neither of us are heroes yet. That's why we're training. And people change. You can't possibly say that you're the same now as you were 10 years ago. All killing him now does is ensure that there's one less potentially true hero. Stain ignored him, just lifted his blade higher. Izuku huffed. Okay then. He took a deep breath, feeling his throat warm as he reached for his reserves. A torrent of flame burst from his lips, and the hero killer was forced to retreat somewhat or risk being incinerated. Thankfully Izuku had lifted his head before the paralysis kicked in, or else he'd risked hitting Ida. Another bolt of fire was launched, this one from down the other side of the alley, forcing Stain further away. There was Todoroki, one side lit up and phone brandished in the opposite hand. Midoriya. You need to give more details in times like this. Ida said something, but it went in one ear and out the other. Izuku was transfixed by the fire billowing out from Todoroki's left side, the heat emanating from those flames flickering red-orange-yellow. The chill that went down his spine whenever he saw Todoroki as the memory of being iced in place flashed across his skin was nowhere to be found. Todoroki, he breathed. You're using your fire. Your message took me a while to decipher, Todoroki continued, as if he hadn't heard Izuku at all. Next time you should send more than just your location, but you're not one to send cryptic messages without a reason, are you? Hopefully there's not going to be a next time. Izuku shouted futilely. He knew better than to expect smooth sailing from here, but it didn't stop him from hoping. Todoroki's fire snuffed out as ice laced across the ground, moving Ida and the fallen pro away from Stain, though it didn't touch Izuku. He appreciated that. Still, internally he mourned the loss of those flickering flames. I figured you were in trouble and asking for help, but everything's okay. The pro heroes will be here any minute. Todoroki sent another gout of flame burning in Stain's direction. It was clear he didn't have much practice, but there was power there like hardly anything Izuku had ever seen. Izuku briefly wondered if Todoroki would consider training with him. It would definitely be a step up from practicing on a trash-filled beach. You're just who they said you were, Todoroki said evenly, but you won't be taking any more lives, hero killer. Todoroki! Izuku yelled. You can't let him get your blood. I think his quirk lets him control his enemy's actions by swallowing it. That's how he got us. So he ingests blood to keep people from moving. It explains the blades. All I've got to do is keep my distance. A good idea and a noble sentiment, but unfortunately not a very fruitful one, as a thrown knife cut a thin slice into Todoroki's cheek. He grunted, reeling back as Stain lunged. A wall of ice thrown up between him stopped the blow from landing, but Stain was too fast, catching the sword that had been thrown in the air and getting far too close to Todoroki for comfort before a burst of flame pushed him away. Just stop it, why are you doing this? His fight is with me. I inherited my brother's name, I'm the one that should stop him. Ida managed. The hero killer is mine. Todoroki didn't even look back at him, instead sending a barrage of ice spikes at Stain. You're Ingenium now? Funny, the Ingenium I knew before never had that look on his face. You've got a dark side, guess my family isn't the only one. Izuku blinked. What was that supposed to mean? Careful, Todoroki, he called, but was distracted by his twitching fingers. Was Stain's quirk wearing off? So caught up in the euphoria of maybe being able to move again, Izuku nearly missed Stain completely obliterating Todoroki's ice wall. 2 daggers landed in Todoroki's flaming arm, and the fire snuffed out. Gold lightning crackled around Izuku as control of his own body returned to him, and he threw himself between Stain and the hero he was going after to grab the villain and shove him bodily into the wall. Midoriya. I don't know why, but I can move now. Izuku yelled back. Todoroki said something else, but Izuku missed it as he was forced to avoid a series of brutal blows from Stain. Still, he lost his grip and fell to the ground. Midoriya, dodge. He lunged to the side as ice crackled where he'd been moments prior, and he hurried over to where Todoroki stood. He swallows your blood to freeze you, Izuku informed him, but I was the one freed first, and I've got 3 different guesses why. His quirk could be less effective the more people he uses it on, the amount ingested could play into how long it works, or there could be a difference based on people's blood types. If it's the last one, my blood type is B, the hero said. I'm type A, said Ida. So, you figured it out, the hero killer sneered. Bravo. Very impressive. Izuku shot him a dirty look. It doesn't really help us that much to know how his quirk works, though. I thought we could hurry and carry those 2 out of here, Todoroki said, holding his arm, but it's no good. He's too fast. He can dodge both my ice and my fire. Our best ion option is to stall until the pros get here and avoid close combat. Izuku frowned. No, you've already lost way too much blood. I'll distract him while you support me from behind. I might have to steal some of your fire though, I put a lot into that blast while I was paralyzed. You want us to take a pretty big risk. Todoroki stared for a moment, before nodding. Okay. I'm in. We can protect them. 2 against 1, huh? Stain observed. This fight won't be easy. For you, maybe, Izuku snarked, gold lightning crackling around him as he once again called upon one for all. The fight was a flurry of motion, Izuku bouncing off of the alley's walls to try and hide where he'd attack from, something he'd picked up from Gran Torino. Though he was starting to wish he'd learned how to fight with blades, it'd be nice to be able to parry or block Stain's attacks rather than having to dodge them. Even with all his bouncing around, Stain was too fast, and pain lanced up Izuku's leg as a slash landed. A torrent of flame drove Stain off of him, but it didn't matter, as the now familiar sensation of his muscles locking up froze him in place. Izuku, stuck slumped against the wall, could do no more than yell out warnings. It didn't do much though, and all he could do was watch in horror as Stain's sword lashed out in an arc to straight up cut off Todoroki's left arm. Then Ida was there, racing forward just in the nick of time to kick Stain away, sending him skidding back to the other side of the alley. Izuku couldn't help the relieved Ida that escaped his lips. You're free too? Todoroki muttered. Guess his quirk isn't as great as I thought it was. Todoroki, Midoriya, this has nothing to do with you, and I apologize. Izuku, frozen against the wall, shouted, not this again. Ida ignored him and continued. I'm okay, but I won't let the 2 of you shed any more blood for me. It's no use trying to pretend you're a hero now, Stain said, and Izuku's gaze landed on the broken sword held loosely in his grasp. A person's true nature doesn't change in just a few minutes. You'll never be anything more than a fraud who prioritizes his own desires. You're the sickness that's infected society and ruined the name hero. Someone must teach you a lesson. Do you ever shut up? Izuku snapped, but was ignored by all parties. You're just a fundamentalist lunatic, Todoroki said. Ida, don't listen to his nonsense. No, he's completely correct. I have no right to call myself a hero at all. Izuku's gaze narrowed in on the blood dripping down Ida's armored forearm. Not good. Even so, there's no way I can back down. If I give up now, the name Ingenium will die with me. Pathetic. Stain lunged, and Todoroki tried to hold him back with the biggest fire blast yet. Idiots, the downed hero yelled. The hero killer is just after me and the kid in the white armor. Stop fighting and get out of here. I don't think he'd let me run even if I wanted to, Todoroki grunted, and Izuku could see him visible straining to keep the flames going. Izuku, thoroughly done with being paralyzed, decided to try something and reached for his heat reserves. He may not be able to move, but he could still help, and added his own flames to Todoroki's pyre. There was a brief exchange between Todoroki and Ida, but Izuku was too focused on keeping the fire going that he wasn't able to parse out the words. He should really work on that. A blade was launched at Todoroki, and with an especially hot, and vindictive, fire blast Izuku melted it midair. His fingers twitched, and he grinned. You really don't appreciate being able to move until it's stripped from you. His reserves were running low, but Izuku snapped out his wings nonetheless, to give him that extra speed boost he needed to slam his one-for-all enhanced fist right into Stain's face. The villain crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut, and Izuku's wings snuffed out as his reserves ran dry. Todoroki caught their fall with an ice slide. Izuku didn't particularly like the feeling of cool ice against his bare skin, but he'd take it over slamming face first into the ground. He'd done that enough when figuring out his wings for the first time. Quick, we need to tie him up, Izuku said. Is there any rope anywhere? They were able to find some in a nearby dumpster, and after taking as many blades from him as they could find bound his arms behind his back. It was then that the pro-hero Stain had first gone after regained control of his body, and Izuku helped him to his feet. The weird group started to make their way to the mouth of the alley. I should apologize, the hero, who'd introduced himself as native, said. I'm supposed to be a pro, but I was useless back there. I don't think any one person could take the hero killer on, Izuku said, patting him on the back. He's too strong, don't feel bad about it. The three of us barely won against him, and even then it was because of our own mistakes. He was getting riled up and desperate and forgot all about Midoriya's recovery time. Oh Todoroki, you're going to make me blush. Izuku teased. Todoroki blinked at him, seemingly at a loss for words. After clearing his throat, he continued. Then he wasn't able to block Ida's recipro burst or Midoriya's assault. They reached the mouth of the alleyway, and a very familiar voice barked out, "Hey! What are you doing here, boy?" Izuku's gaze landed on the yellow-clad hero across the street. Gran Torino. I was only Dash. Gran Torino's foot impacted with his face, but Izuku could tell from their prior training that he was pulling the punch, so to speak. Was it pulling a punch when it was a kick, not a punch? He'd have to look that up later. I told you to stay on the bullet train. Endeavor got the credit for Stain's takedown, much to Izuku's chagrin. Even though he was a fire-using hero, Izuku had never liked Endeavor much. It was his attitude that did it, though his sky-high collateral damage didn't help much either. It was a peaceful afternoon a few days before they were due to be discharged that he found yet another reason to dislike the flame hero. Midoriya, Todoroki said quietly, have you ever heard of Quirk marriages? By the end of Todoroki's tale, Izuku was steaming. Literally. If you ever need somewhere to stay, my doors are always open to you, Izuku said, after a few calming breaths. Todoroki just looked at his hands. Thanks. Going back to school after both fighting the hero killer and that revelation was certainly an experience. It was weird putting his costume back on after all that he'd been through in it. He'd requested that some lightweight body armor be incorporated into the design, to hopefully avoid any future stabbings, and it looked like the support course had done their job super well. The class gathered in Field Gamma, where All Might announced that for training that day they'd be conducting a race, to show off what they'd learned in their internships. Izuku briefly considered just flying over but decided against it. He wanted to show off what he'd learned. It went pretty well, all things considered. He did slip at one point near the end but was able to shift into Pheonix form to catch himself, and then flew the rest of the race from there. Then All Might asked to meet with him after school. He wove a tale of a man with the power to give and take quirks as he pleased, who built an empire of villains and ruled Japan from the underground. He told him of the man's quirkless younger brother, weak and sickly but with a strong sense of justice, and how the man forced a stockpiling quirk on him. And then, he told him how the younger brother turned out to be not so quirkless after all, that the stockpiling quirk combined with the brother's original quirk to create one for all. Izuku went home that day with his mind reeling. The fact that the man who'd given All Might his injury was the same as this urban legend turned history fact, and that he was still alive and the brain behind the League of Villains? It terrified him. And then, before he knew it, final exams were upon him. I'm kinda nervous about the practical, he confessed during lunch one day. I mean, we've got no idea what it's gonna be. It's hard to believe they'd give us anything too crazy, Ida reasoned. The written portion is all going to be questions from class, so I at least should be able to do those. He got fourth in the midterms, so he wasn't too worried about the written exams. Do you really think it's going to be that simple? Uraraka asked. It's driving me nuts, Izuku said, head in his hands. I just want to know what they'll be having us doing. All Aizawa would tell is that it's a comprehensive test of everything we've learned so far this year, Hagakure said. So it'll cover rescue, combat and basic training, right? Uraraka said. And we can't just study, we have to stay in great physical shape too, Izuku said, only to nearly faceplant into his food when something knocked into the back of his head. Oh sorry, said Monoma from Class B, not looking sorry at all. Your head's so big it's hard to miss. Don't worry about it, I've got a hard head, Izuku said cheerfully. Monoma blinked at him, a little put off. Nonetheless, he shook his head and continued. I heard you guys stumbled across the hero killer. Just like in the sports festival, Class 1A isn't happy unless they're the center of attention. But you do realize that you're not in the spotlight because people think you're good heroes, right? It's just that you keep getting into so much trouble. Have you considered that one day you might drag all of us into your mess, and then we'll all become unwilling victims as well? What kind of horrible villains will you bring down upon us? He dropped to the ground in a heap as a hand impacted the back of his head. That's not funny, said the person that the hand belonged to. You heard what happened to Ida, chill out. Kendo. Sorry about him, the newly identified Kendo said. I'm pretty sure there's a hole where his heart should be. Izuku eyed Monoma where he hung limply from Kendo's grasp. Was he unconscious? So, I couldn't help but overhear that you guys were worried about what was going to be on the big final practical? I heard from an upperclassman who's a friend of mine that it'll be combat against robots like the entrance exam. I know, it's kind of cheating dash, she shrugged, but oh well. What kind of idiot are you, Kendo? Monoma said. Oh good, he was awake. You just gave away our strategic advantage. This was our chance to get ahead of those Class A idiots. Kendo chopped him on the back of the head again and dragged him away. They're not the idiots. The 3 days of written exams passed in what felt like the blink of an eye, and 1A gathered in the central plaza of the training grounds for their practical exam. Izuku eyed up the teachers standing in front of them. He had a bad feeling about this. Now then, let's begin the last test, Aizawa said. Remember, it's possible to fail this final. If you want to go to the training camp, don't make any stupid mistakes. Why are all the teachers here? Jairu. Ever the observant one. Nizu popped out of Aizawa's scarf and revealed they'd be fighting the teachers in pairs. A chill went down Izuku's spine. Of course, there are only 19 of you, so one team will be a group of 3, Nizu said, far too cheerfully. Aizawa grunted. Midoriya, Shiro and Bakugu, you're the group of 3, and your opponent dash. For a moment the sun was blotted out, and All Might landed before them. The ground cracked beneath his feet. I am here, to fight. Oh no. As much as he wanted to watch the other matches, Izuku knew there wouldn't be time for that. Not if they wanted to win against All Might. Instead, he wasted zero time in pulling Shiro and Katsuki to a solitary corner to start plotting. We all know our best chance of winning is to run, he said, mind already whirring with ideas. The question is, do we send someone to run interference? I know you'll want to fight, Kaken, but what about you, Shiro? Shiro's face was carefully blank. Izuku wasn't sure there was a thought behind those eyes other than panic. I'll take that as a no, then. Katsuki scowled. You and I have the most firepower, so we'll fight while Tape Face goes for the gate. We'll just have to buy you as much time as we can, Shiro, Izuku agreed. Do you think you can do it? Shiro let out a quiet little laugh. This is worse than going up against Todoroki in the sports fest, you know? At least Roki was a classmate. All Might's the #1 hero, how are you two so? Calm? I'm great at compartmentalizing, Izuku said. I'm fine right now but I'll probably cry a lot afterwards. And I don't think Kaken can feel fear. Katsuki smacked him over the back of the head. You're an idiot. An idiot with a plan, though. Let's talk specifics, shall we? I want to win just as much as you too. He wasn't going to lie, Tenya was a little terrified. Maybe more than a little, actually, but that wasn't something he was going to admit out loud. On screen, Bakugu and Midoriya clashed against All Might in a flurry of eye-wateringly bright explosions and fire blasts. The firepower displayed would make anyone balk at the sight of it, but not All Might. The hero hardly seemed fazed, and Tenya winced as Bakugu got used as a projectile to knock Midoriya out of the sky. Midoriya's flaming wings flickered for a moment as he impacted the ground, but he pushed himself to his feet and launched back into the fray. Tenya couldn't help but admire his classmates' tenacity. Bakugu's gauntlets had since been destroyed and it was clearly a one-sided fight, but outmatched as they were, Midoriya and Bakugu refused to give up. You could almost describe it as hypnotic, in a horrifying kind of way. Midoriya tumbled through the air and crashed into the side of a building. All Might grabbed Bakugu by the face and threw him into the ground. Midoriya tried to fly up to get a better vantage point and got punched in the gut for his efforts. Rinse. Repeat. No matter how many times they were battered and beaten down, they got right back up again. Midoriya landed on All Might's broad shoulders, his mouth pulled up into a grin as he shouted something rendered intelligible by the cameras. Blood dripped from the corner, red against the pallor of his face. A series of rapid-fire explosions from Bakugu filled the space around them with smoke as Midoriya landed on All Might's broad shoulders, his mouth pulled up into a grin as he shouted something rendered intelligible by the cameras. An explosion ripped through the fake street. Shrapnel flew from the impact, and so did Bakugu, crashing into the ground a small way away. Tenya's heart leapt into his throat as the camera cut from the destruction to Shiro, bolting for the escape gate. Team Bakugu, Midoriya and Shiro have passed, wrung out, and the camera cut back over to the clearing smoke. At first glance, it looked like the only one left standing was All Might, Midoriya, a crumpled form at his feet. A beat passes. Then, across the street, Bakugu pushed himself up to his haunches, spitting blood. The pile of limbs that was Midoriya twitched, and he too pulled himself to a sitting position. His lips pulled into a wide smile, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. We did it. Izuku screeched at the top of his lungs. Considering the current state of his lungs, it wasn't especially loud, but still. It was the thought that counted. We passed, he breathed, after a moment. We actually did it. It was then that the pain hit him. Oh ow. He winced as his ear feathers twitched in pain. Hold on. Wait a second. Ear feathers? Later that day, after recovery girls given him a clean bill of health and sent him home, he stared at himself in the bathroom mirror. His fingers drifted over the feathers stemming from the mini wings that have taken the place of his ears. Strangely enough, he could still hear as well as if he still had human ears, and the feather shivered at the slightest touch. Creeping along his cheekbones, continuing the line up from his not ears were tiny feathers in the same yellow gold as the ones in his hair. His face dropped into his hands. When I said I thought I was turning into a bird, I said it as a joke. Am I going to grow tail feathers next? The school semester ended with an unfortunate encounter, Shigaraki nearly strangling him at the mall. Izuku tried to put it out of his mind. What with being thrown off of a cliff and having to fight their way to camp, there was a lot taking priority. By the time the class finally made it to the campsite, he was dead on his feet. The exhaustion was probably a big reason why he didn't exercise much caution when he introduced himself to the extremely angry child. Later, he found out from Mandalay that the kid was so angry because his parents had been killed. Certainly, a valid reason for a small child to be angry with heroes. Still, it hurt Izuku's soul a little bit to see him so unhappy. The ceiling didn't give him any answers as he stared up at it, so for now he just tugged his blanket a little more snug around him and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would be another day.
Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed the video just leave a like, and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.